I'm Logan. I'm 19 years old and I'm studying to be a doctor. I'm from Texas, but now I live in New York City for college. My parents are in Dallas, where my dad works as a surgeon at a university hospital, and my mom stays home. After high school, I moved to New York and I've been on my own for about 4 months now, since July. My dad's work inspired me to study hard and get into medical school. But since coming here, I haven't had the typical college experience I hoped for. I've been focused on my studies, which is important, but I also wanted to hang out with friends and join clubs. Unfortunately, money has been tight, so I couldn't do those things. My parents pay my tuition, but I have to pay for everything else like rent and living expenses. To make ends meet, I've been doing different jobs like tutoring, working at events, and even at a bar. But it's been tough. I often have to switch between shifts at different jobs just to get by each month. Weekends are when I try to earn the most money. I never really had a day off. It was tough both mentally and physically. I get sleepy during class, and when I come home late at night, I'm too tired to study. I'm worried I might fail my classes and have to repeat the year if things keep going like this. Studying should be my top priority, but I'm struggling to focus. I felt anxious and desperate, so I called my mom for some financial help, even if it was just a little. My dad is hardly ever home because he's busy with his job, so my mom handles the finances. I thought they could help because my dad earns well, but my mom said they couldn't afford to send extra money. Many of my friends get financial help from their parents, and I wished I had that too. Despite all this, I kept working hard at my jobs. The midterms came, but I hadn't studied enough, and as I expected, I had to retake some exams. After finishing the retests in early August, my summer vacation began. I'm planning to work a lot during this long break to earn as much money as possible. Once summer is over, I'll focus more on my studies. That means cutting down on work hours, which should help my finances. To save money, I've been eating cheap foods like instant noodles, bread, and discounted meals. I also use my bike instead of paying for transportation. Growing up, I never had to worry about money, so this new life of financial struggle is unexpected and tough. Despite all this, I stay in touch with college friends through texts. Seeing their fun photos makes me realize how different our lives are, even though we go to the same university. My friends often invited me out, but I had to reluctantly decline because I didn't have the money or the time. Let's go somewhere that doesn't cost anything, I suggested. One of our classmates messaged me, "Are you sure you're okay? You always seem tired at school, and I think you're working too much." My friend was concerned about me. I've got the physical stamina, and I need to earn my living expenses. Let's meet up once school starts again, I replied. After that, I went to work at the bar as usual, but something happened shortly after. I collapsed during my shift. It was a busy Friday with lots of customers, and as I was carrying drinks, I suddenly felt dizzy. I don't remember much after that, but when I came to, I found myself in the hospital. According to the doctor, I collapsed due to exhaustion and malnutrition. I received treatment and was allowed to go home the same day. I immediately called my boss at the bar to apologize. My boss explained that after I collapsed, he had called my name, but I was too out of it to respond, so he called an ambulance. He had also contacted my parents. "You've been taking on a lot of shifts, and I relied too much on that. I'm sorry about that. I want you to rest easy for the rest of the month," my boss said. This meant a cut in my income. As I rode the subway home from the hospital, I wondered if I should take on more tutoring jobs. I found myself at a loss. I was supposed to work at the bar the next day, but that suddenly turned into a day off. I decided to quietly stay in bed today. While checking my phone, I noticed a message from my friend that I had missed while I was unconscious. I replied and explained why my response was delayed. Upon learning about my situation, my friend decided to come over. He bought groceries at the supermarket and made spaghetti for me. While eating the meal he had kindly prepared, our conversation turned to the topic of living expenses for someone living alone. When I mentioned that I wasn't receiving any financial support from home, my friend was surprised. "That's why you've been working so hard. Your dad's a doctor. You should be getting some support." "No," I explained. "I asked Mom, and she said they're barely managing with just my tuition." "But you're an only child, right? Maybe if you ask, they could send a little support," my friend suggested. My mom said even a small amount of support was out of the question. "No way, that doesn't make sense. I hate to say this, but maybe your dad is sick and can't work," my friend speculated. Thinking it over, I said, "My dad is a doctor and used to drive a luxury car. Our house is in an upscale neighborhood, and I went to private schools my whole life. So why would mom suddenly say they have no money? Suddenly worried, I immediately messaged my mom. Are you both okay? She replied after a while. We're fine, but I couldn't relax, thinking maybe they were just saying that to keep me from worrying. Since I had planned to go home for the holidays, I decided to talk to my parents about this. After thanking my friend, he said, I'll be waiting for some souvenirs. I felt grateful to have such a friend. The holiday season came and I took the cheapest flight I could find back home. I could only stay for a night and a day because of my job, but I was looking forward to it. When I arrived, my parents greeted me at the door. My dad seemed surprised when he saw me. You've lost a lot of weight. Really? I hadn't noticed myself, but apparently I looked quite different. My mom was also taken aback and fell silent. For lunch, my mom had prepared things like salad, soup, and chicken wings, and for the first time in a long while, the three of us sat down to eat together. As soon as we sat down, my dad looked worried and asked, You look thinner. Are you eating properly? I told him the truth. Not really. It's been a while since I had such a luxurious meal. What do you usually eat? Cafeteria food? My dad asked. Nah, the cafeteria is too expensive for me. Is it that expensive? It's about $5 or so. My dad looked puzzled. Is the money I've been sending enough for you? Confused, I responded. Huh? I haven't been getting any money. I finally told my dad. What do you mean? So you mean to tell me you haven't received any money for the past 4 months? He asked, shocked. I haven't received any, I replied. Have you really been sending money? I had asked your mom to transfer $2,000 every month into your account, Dad said, surprised. Really? I was surprised. Mom told me that your finances were tight and that she couldn't afford to send any money. I explained. Dad looked perplexed. We have enough money. Paisley, have you been sending money to Logan properly? He asked Mom. Mom looked down silently. I was worried that maybe Dad got sick or something and couldn't work, and that's why the money wasn't coming. No, I've been working as usual, Dad assured. Really? That's a relief, I said, somewhat relieved. But then why hadn't any money been sent to me? I was baffled. Cassie, what's going on? Dad pressed Mom. Still refusing to meet our eyes, Mom remained silent. Come on, don't stay silent. Can you explain? Dad insisted. When Dad pressed her, Mom finally said quietly, I haven't sent any money. What? I haven't sent any money to Logan, she admitted. Hearing this, both my dad and I were stunned. What? Why not? Dad asked, incredulous. There are just so many expenses, Mom replied. What kind of expenses? Isn't our home mortgage already paid off? Dad questioned. Realizing she could no longer hide the truth, Mom dropped a bombshell. I've been keeping the money for myself, she confessed. I was dumbstruck. I read online that medical students can earn more than regular students with tutoring jobs, so I thought you'd be okay. I asked you to send me even just a small amount of money, but honestly, I didn't realize you were that strapped for cash, Mom explained. My mom continued in a matter-of-fact tone. There was a call from Logan's workplace recently saying you collapsed from overwork. I was also shocked to see how thin you've become. What? Logan collapsed. What happened? It seemed my dad hadn't been informed about the recent events, so I explained. You collapsed from overwork and malnutrition. Yeah, but it wasn't anything serious, I added. Paisley, why didn't you tell me? My dad asked, clearly upset. I'm sorry. I was afraid he'd find out I wasn't sending the money, my mom said without any sign of guilt. This is outrageous. Logan had to work until he collapsed because he didn't have any money, Dad exclaimed. I didn't mean any harm, my mom defended herself. What have you been using all the money for? Dad confronted her. After a brief pause, she finally spoke up. Well, actually, I have some debts. What? Those were unimaginable words coming from her, who always seemed to perfectly manage the household and even took care of the garden flowers, I thought. The money was used to pay off my debts, Mom continued. Debt? How much do you owe? Dad asked, clearly in disbelief. Mom, still looking down, said quietly, about $100,000. $100,000. I was shocked by the amount. My dad sighed deeply. Why do you have so much debt? I got into gambling, Mom confessed. Basically, I had gotten myself into gambling debts without our knowledge. Why would you even start something like that? Dad asked, holding his head in his hands. About 2 years ago, I started gambling just to kill time. I won some money and it felt really good at first. I only used small amounts, but going to the casino became a habit, and I started betting more and more. I couldn't stop, and it led to that amount. I had never gambled, so I couldn't understand why she couldn't stop. Yes, I kept trying to win back what I lost, but I ended up losing more often than winning. I even dipped into our savings, she admitted. So you've spent more than just the debt amount? Dad yelled at her. How much of our savings did you use? He demanded. About $30,000, Mom confessed. I stopped withdrawing more because I thought you would find out. She looked like she was about to cry. If you'd talked to me about it earlier, it might have been better. With that amount, you could have worked part-time and paid it back little by little, right? Dad said. I absolutely don't want to work part-time, she said emphatically. Get a grip. You racked up the debt yourself. He was visibly angry. I've been a stay-at-home mom for so long. There's no way I can work now. That's why I borrowed money from payday lenders, she confessed. I was stunned by her selfish reasoning. Then the interest piled up and the debt just grew. I got involved with various lenders, and now I can't make payments anywhere. I'm completely overwhelmed. Dad sighed again. Are you still gambling in this situation? Yes, I see no choice, Mom admitted. Then I'll pay off the debt for you, Dad said decisively. Really? Mom stood up from her chair, her face brightening with joy. I knew you would help me. She rushed towards him, looking moved. However, things didn't turn out as favorably for her. But this is your severance. Let's get a divorce, Dad said abruptly. What? I was surprised. Divorce? I will never agree to a divorce, Mom said firmly. Her face turned from joy to terror, as if she had been cast down from heaven to hell. You continued gambling even knowing Logan was struggling, right? You kept borrowing money, endangering the family, Dad pointed out. That's true, but I can't continue as a family with a wife who prioritizes gambling over her son, he insisted. No way, she finally burst into tears. I'll never gamble again. Please forgive me, she pleaded. But he seemed resolute. Your gambling is likely an addiction. You'll need to see a psychiatrist and undergo long-term treatment. It's not uncommon for people to relapse into gambling during treatment. I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime, she protested. No, if this continues, we could all end up destitute. I have to separate, not just for my sake, but to stop burdening Logan any further. I'll stop from tomorrow, she insisted, but she did not seem to grasp the severity of her inability to stop gambling. I was deeply anxious about the amount of debt and my mom's pathological gambling behavior. In exchange for paying your severance, there will be no division of assets, my dad stated. What? I can't agree to those terms. If you don't pay back the debt, they might seize your account. She fell silent. I never imagined coming home after a long time would lead to this situation. I was just unsettled by my parents fighting. No, Dad, don't you think we can hold off on deciding about divorce? Maybe take some time to cool off and think it over, I suggested. I'm sorry, Logan, but that's not possible, he said calmly. I thought he might have decided on divorce in a fit of despair, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Lunch ended in a heavy atmosphere, and I went to my room. I lay down on the sofa, but I could still hear my parents arguing. It wasn't much of an argument. My mom was hysterically screaming, and my dad responded firmly. I got so fed up with college and home that I just went to sleep out of frustration. The next morning, my mom looked awful, probably from crying all night. I had planned to stay at home a bit longer, but the oppressive atmosphere made me decide to leave early. My dad drove me to the airport. Logan, I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused, he apologized to me. No, it's not your fault, Dad. I'm grateful for the chance to attend medical school, I reassured him. I'll start transferring an allowance directly to your account from now on, so don't worry, he said. Yeah, thanks, Dad. It really helps, I replied. I know things are tough, but take care, he said as he dropped me off. I flew back to New York. The rest of the summer vacation was busy with work, passing by in a flash. Still, I was constantly worried about my parents. A few months later, I heard that my mom finally agreed to the divorce. My dad's steadfastness broke her resistance. As previously discussed, my dad took on her debts, and in return, there was no asset division in their divorce agreement. I have mixed feelings about my parents getting divorced, but it's not all bad news. Now that I'm receiving an allowance from my dad, I've been able to cut back on work and focus more on my studies. I might even get to hang out with friends. I heard from my grandmother on my mother's side that despite the divorce over her gambling, my mom was back at the slot machines every day. She quickly racked up more debt. Her family couldn't afford to cover her debts, so my mom reluctantly started working part-time. She's currently attending therapy to overcome her gambling addiction.
Kayla, why do you look so lost? Are you okay? Todd's warm breath mixed with the frosty air. His concern seemed genuine, but I could feel the tears threatening to spill. Forcing a smile, I answered, "Just thinking. Let's go home and enjoy the stew I've been preparing." As we walked, the city around us bustled in Christmas cheer. The streets were lined with twinkling lights and families enjoying the season. I clung to Todd's arm, dreading the evening ahead. Our apartment, though small, was cozy and warm. Todd shrugged off his coat and tossed it over the couch, then headed straight for the kitchen. He lifted the lid on the stew pot, inhaling deeply. "Smells good," he remarked, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I nodded, placing freshly baked bread on the table. We sat down to eat, but the tension in the room was palpable. Todd's initial warmth had faded, replaced by a cold demeanor I recognized all too well. I focused on my bowl, hoping we could get through the meal without incident. "Did you see that new couple moving in next door?" Todd asked abruptly. Caught off guard, I nodded again. "They seemed nice," I said, trying to sound casual. "Seem nice?" Todd's voice hardened. "You talked to them without telling me first?" "I just said hello, Todd. It wasn't a big deal." I kept my voice calm, my hands nervously gripping my spoon. "It is a big deal. I told you to always tell me when you talk to people." He glared at me, and I felt a familiar chill creep in. His control over me had grown stronger over the years. I used to believe his intentions were protective, born out of love. But now, sitting across from him, I saw the truth, an illusion of perfection masking a man who thrived on power and control. After dinner, Todd retreated to the living room, leaving me to clean up. I could hear the TV blaring in the background, but I stayed in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with a focus that helped numb my thoughts. The water was scalding, but I welcomed the pain. It was a distraction. "Kayla!" Todd's voice cut through my trance. I quickly dried my hands and walked into the living room. He was on the couch, remote in hand, eyes glued to the screen. "Yes?" I asked softly. "Bring me a beer." I headed to the fridge, grabbed a can, and handed it to him. He didn't look at me. His focus was solely on the game. I stood there for a moment, waiting for some acknowledgement, some sign that he saw me. But nothing came. I was invisible to him, a mere shadow in the background of his life. Finding my voice, I said, "I'm going to bed, Todd." He grunted in response, and I turned away, heading to our bedroom. As I lay in the dark, memories of happier times bubbled up. Nana's comforting words, her wisdom about finding happiness beyond the darkness. I clung to those memories tightly, using them as a shield against the creeping despair. With Nana's words echoing in my mind, I made a silent vow. Somehow, I would find my happiness. I wouldn't let this cold, controlling life define me. As I drifted off to sleep, the city's twinkling lights were now a distant memory, replaced by the suffocating walls of our apartment and the man who trapped me within them. Little did Todd know his grip was not as strong as he thought. And one day, he would learn that the hard way. "No hot sauce? Seriously, Kayla? You can't even handle a simple grocery list." Todd's voice boomed through our small apartment, his face flushed with anger. I flinched, trying to keep my composure. "I'm sorry, Todd, I must have forgotten. I'll get it tomorrow." "Forget it. You always forget. What's the point of you if you can't do anything right?" His words stung, each one a jab at my already bruised spirit. I nodded silently, refusing to let him see how his words cut me. Instead, I busied myself setting the table for breakfast. Todd stormed out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. As I poured the coffee, Nana's voice echoed in my head, her comforting presence always a source of strength. "You'll face struggles, but you'll find happiness beyond the darkness." I wished she was here now. I could almost see her sitting at the small round table, her kind eyes filled with wisdom. But those days were gone, and I was left to navigate this overwhelming loneliness. Todd's job kept him out of the apartment during the day, which was my only solace. I planned to visit Nana today, hoping her familiar scent of lavender and old books would offer some relief. In the afternoon, I grabbed my coat and headed to Nana's house, the cold air biting at my cheeks. Her home, a small, cozy haven, welcomed me with open arms. As I stepped inside, the warmth enveloped me, and for a brief moment, I felt safe. "Kayla, there's my beautiful girl," Nana greeted me with a gentle hug. "Come, sit down, have some tea." We sat at her modest kitchen table, the steam rising from our mugs. I watched Nana as she moved around, her frail frame a stark contrast to the powerhouse of strength she embodied. "How's it going, dear?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I hesitated. "It's been hard, Nana. Sometimes I feel so alone." Nana reached across the table, her hands gripping mine with surprising strength. "I've always told you, Kayla, you'll face struggles, but you have a fire in you. You'll find happiness. Remember that." I nodded, absorbing her words like a sponge, desperate for any bit of hope. As we talked, memories of my childhood flooded back. Sundays spent baking cookies with Nana, her laughter filling the air. She was my rock, the one constant in a world spinning out of control. After a long afternoon of sharing stories and sipping tea, I felt lighter somehow. Nana's unwavering belief in me sparked a glimmer of hope. I hugged her tightly before leaving, her soft voice a whisper in my ear. "Stay strong, Kayla. Better days are coming." Back at the apartment, the coldness hit me as soon as I stepped inside. Todd was sprawled on the couch, a beer in his hand, eyes glued to the TV screen. "Where have you been?" he demanded without looking up. "Visited Nana," I replied, hanging my coat. "Well, it's about time you got home. Make sure you don't forget the hot sauce tomorrow." I swallowed my frustration, nodding silently. As I prepared dinner, Nana's words played over in my mind, a silent chant to keep me going. Better days are coming, I told myself over and over, clinging to that flicker of hope. Todd's grip might be suffocating, but Nana's wisdom gave me strength. Somehow, I would find the courage to break free. One day, Todd would realize that his control was slipping, and my resilience would be his downfall. I awoke the next morning, feeling the weight of yesterday's visit to Nana still lingering. Her words cycled through my mind, giving me a faint sense of strength. But Todd's looming presence was a constant reminder of my reality. By midday, after completing my chores, I decided to head back to Nana's. Her home was my sanctuary, the only place where I felt any semblance of peace. I slipped out quietly, not wanting to wake Todd, who was sprawled on the couch, snoring lightly from last night's binge. Arriving at Nana's, I instantly felt calmer. She greeted me with her usual warmth, pulling me into a tight embrace. "You look tired, dear. Come and sit down," she said, leading me to the kitchen. We settled at the table, and she poured us both a cup of tea. The familiarity of her actions was comforting. "Nana, I've been thinking a lot about what you said," I admitted, tracing my finger along the edge of the cup, "about facing struggles and finding happiness." "Good," she replied, her eyes meeting mine with a knowing look. "Remember, Kayla, you'll find happiness beyond the darkness." I nodded, feeling the resolve build up inside me. "Thank you, Nana. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll find your way, Kayla, although the path might be hard." Feeling lighter, I left Nana's house and returned to our apartment. The weight of Todd's presence hit me immediately upon entering. He was awake now, sitting at the table with a scowl etched on his face. "What took you so long?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. "I was visiting Nana again," I explained, setting my bag down. "You're always running off there. Maybe you should move in with her," he sneered. Ignoring his comment, I went to the kitchen to start dinner. The silence was thick, filled with unspoken tensions. I could feel Todd's eyes boring into my back as I prepared the meal. Later that evening, as we were eating, Todd's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his demeanor shifted, a sly smirk appearing on his lips. Curiosity piqued, I watched as he typed something back, quickly and secretively. "You seem happy," I noted, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. "I just got some good news from work," he replied nonchalantly, not looking up. After dinner, I cleaned up, my mind whirling with suspicions. Todd's secretive behavior had been growing, and my gut told me there was more to it than just work. As I lay in bed that night, Nana's words reverberated in my mind, offering a small but significant comfort. The path was undeniably hard, but I had to believe that happiness waited for me, somewhere beyond the turmoil. The next day, while Todd was at work, I decided to take a small step towards reclaiming my freedom. I visited a nearby real estate office, inquiring about small, affordable apartments. I didn't make any commitments, but gathering information was the first step towards my eventual escape. Returning home later that day, I felt a mixture of fear and empowerment. Todd was already back and met me with his usual chilly disposition. "Where have you been?" he snapped, his tone accusatory. "Just running errands," I replied casually, refusing to meet his gaze. His eyes scanned my face, searching for any hint of defiance. Finding none, he retreated to his usual spot on the couch. I busied myself with mundane tasks, my mind buzzing with the possibilities that stretched ahead. Nana's words continued to echo in my mind, a beacon guiding me through the darkness. I wasn't sure how or when, but I knew that one day I would break free. And Todd would see just how strong I could be. The day started out normal. I was grocery shopping, crossing items off the list, trying to keep my mind focused. But a strange weariness had settled over me. I ignored it, convincing myself it was just the stress of everything weighing me down. As I reached for a box of cereal, a dizzy spell hit me hard. My vision blurred, the sounds around me became distant. Before I could react, everything went dark. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. The sterile smell filled my nostrils. A nurse noticed I was awake and rushed to my side. "You're at St. Mary's Hospital," she explained softly. "You fainted in the grocery store. We ran some tests." Confusion and fear churned within me. What tests? What did they find? The doctor walked in, carrying a clipboard. His expression was serious. "Mrs. Smith, I'm Dr. Martin. We need to discuss your results." My heart pounded. "What's wrong with me?" Dr. Martin took a deep breath. "Your blood work revealed an infection. It's an STD, Mrs. Smith, chlamydia." I stared at him, my world collapsing. "That's impossible. I've only been with my husband." Dr. Martin looked at me with a mix of pity and concern. "This type of infection typically spreads through sexual contact. It's important you inform your partner and seek treatment." Numbness washed over me as Dr. Martin continued talking, but his words became a distant echo. Todd. He had to be the source. I couldn't believe he betrayed me like this. Back at the apartment, Todd was sitting on the couch, half watching TV. I stormed in, my anger boiling over. "Todd, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. He barely glanced at me. "What now, Kayla?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. "I've never been with anyone else, Todd. Who did you give this to me from?" Todd's head snapped up, his face turning pale. "What are you talking about?" "The doctor found an STD, Todd," I said, my voice cracking. "Chlamydia. Who else have you been sleeping with?" He stood up, his eyes blazing. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Who else would it be?" I shouted back. "I've only ever been with you. You did this to me." For a moment, Todd looked like he was going to deny it, but then his expression shifted to something colder. "You know what, Kayla? Maybe if you weren't so useless at home, I wouldn't have needed someone else." The room spun around me. His words cut deeper than any knife. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. You betrayed me," I whispered. Todd scoffed. "Get over it. It's not the end of the world." But to me it felt like it was. Any hope I had clung to was shattered. The dream of a family, children, and a life full of love was obliterated in an instant. "Get out of my sight," he spat, storming out of the room. I was left alone in the cold, empty apartment, my body racked with sobs. Nana's voice echoed softly in my mind, offering a small, fragile comfort amidst the tumult. "Stay strong, Kayla. Better days are coming." As broken as I felt, a new resolve settled in my heart. Todd had taken much from me, but he wouldn't take my hope. One way or another I would break free from his grasp, and he would pay for every tear he forced me to shed. "I'll obey you, Todd, but remember, you asked for this," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the kettle whistling on the stove. Todd paid no attention to my words, lost in his phone, his face illuminated by the screen's blue light. He smirked and shrugged, barely looking up. "Good girl." Inside, I seethed with a mixture of rage and determination. His casual dismissal only fueled my drive. That night, as he slept peacefully, I quietly slipped out of bed and headed to the closet. I pulled down an old suitcase and began packing the essentials. I made sure to be quiet, each rustle of fabric sounding deafening in the silence of the night. The next few days, I tread carefully, making sure not to alert Todd to my plans. I stashed money away, small amounts here and there, enough to get me started once I left. I contacted a few friends I could trust, securing a place to crash temporarily. Every interaction with Todd became an act. My compliance was strategic. My silence was a weapon. It was all part of a plan he never saw coming. Did you remember the groceries? Todd asked one evening, not looking up from his dinner. Yes, I picked everything up, I replied, handing him the receipt without a second thought. Good, he muttered, his attention completely on the TV. His complacency disgusted me, but it also worked in my favor. That weekend, Todd had a work event he couldn't get out of. He left the apartment early, suited up and ready to impress. I watched from the window as his car pulled away. As soon as he was out of sight, I sprang into action. I pulled out the hidden suitcase from under the bed and added the final items. I grabbed the envelope of cash I had stashed behind a loose brick in the wall. Every move was made with precision, every step a part of my silent resolve. I had already secured a temporary place with my friend Jenny, who had been more than supportive when I confided in her. You can stay as long as you need, she had assured me over the phone, her voice calm and steady. With everything packed, I took a final look around the apartment. This place had held so much promise once. Now it was just a cage, suffocating and cold. My eyes landed on a photo of Todd and me from happier times. I picked it up, feeling the weight of lost dreams in my hands. Then, with a deep breath, I set it down gently on the coffee table and walked out the door. As I locked the door behind me, I felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Fear of the unknown and relief from the oppressive life I was leaving behind. I hurried to meet the cab waiting for me at the entrance of our building. As we sped away, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. The building shrank from view, and with it, the remnants of my life with Todd. Arriving at Jenny's place, she greeted me with a warm hug. You're safe here, she reassured me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe her. As I settled into the guest room, Nana's words echoed in my mind. Stay strong, Kayla. Better days are coming. As I lay down that night, I felt a spark of hope bloom amidst my exhaustion. Todd had underestimated me greatly. He might have broken my heart, but my spirit was far from defeated. The real journey was just beginning, and this time I would be the one in control. Why didn't you tell me about the STD, Todd? Who else are you sleeping with? My voice cut through the quiet room like a knife as Todd entered our old childhood home, now vacant, except for the memories that clung to the walls. Todd's face twisted in shocked anger. How did you find out about this place? And what the hell are you talking about? I know everything, I replied, my tone steady, years of pent-up rage and betrayal boiling over. I've been recording our conversations, Todd. Every demeaning comment, every time you raised your voice. I have it all. For a moment, Todd's confidence wavered, but his arrogance quickly returned. You think anyone will believe you? You have no proof. You're just a desperate, scorned woman. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, calmly pressing play on the audio files I had saved. Todd's venomous words filled the space, each one a piece of the puzzle that painted an unmistakable picture of his true nature. They'll believe me, I said, my voice stronger now. I've kept everything documented, and it's not just me, Todd. Others know too. His eyes widened, and for the first time I saw genuine fear. What do you want, Kayla? Money? Apologies? None of this will change anything. I'm not doing this for money or apologies, I stated. I want you to face the consequences of your actions. You've hurt me, deceived me, and now it's time for you to pay. Todd clenched his fist, stepping closer. You think you're tough now, Kayla? You think you can take me down? You're pathetic. Ignoring his attempt to intimidate me, I continued, You're going to come clean. You're going to face everyone and tell them the truth about who you are. A cruel laugh escaped Todd's lips. And if I don't, then I'll release these recordings. I've made sure they're in safe hands. You can't stop them from getting out, I replied, holding his gaze with unwavering determination. Todd's confidence shattered. He paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair. You're bluffing. Try me, I challenged. We both know what's at stake. Todd's face contorted with rage, but he knew he was trapped. He couldn't risk losing everything he'd built on lies. Fine, he spat out. I'll meet with your people. But this isn't over, Kayla. I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my gaze. Oh, it's just beginning, and remember, every step you take, I'll be there watching. He stormed out of the house, leaving me standing alone in the echo of his departure. My heart pounded, but I felt an overwhelming sense of justification. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. As I walked out, the memories of our childhood home seemed to fade, replaced by the strength of my new resolve. Todd would soon learn that karma had a long reach, and his time of reckoning was at hand. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, the odds were in my favor. As I headed back to Jenny's, the words Nana used to say echoed in my mind. You'll face struggles, but you'll find happiness beyond the darkness. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing the power of my own resilience. Todd's control over me was at its end, and the real battle was about to begin. Your lies are finally catching up to you, Todd. They know everything, I said with cold satisfaction, watching him squirm in the center of his office meeting room. Todd's mask of confidence cracked entirely in that moment. His eyes darted around the room, filled with his colleagues and his boss, Mr. Jenkins. They all wore expressions of shock and disbelief as the recordings of his verbal abuse played from the speakers. What is this? Mr. Jenkins demanded, his face turning red with anger. This is not the man we thought we knew. Todd stumbled over his words, attempting to regain control. This is private. This doesn't concern my work. Kayla, you have no right. I cut him off sharply. You acted one way at home, Todd, but you can't hide anymore. Everyone sees the real you now. Sarah, one of Todd's close colleagues, stood up, her voice trembling with anger. How could you, Todd? We trusted you. We thought you were one of us, but you've been living a lie. Todd's eyes narrowed, his attempts to gather sympathy faltering. Sarah, you don't understand. This is all her doing. She's trying to ruin me. Mr. Jenkins raised a hand to silence Todd. I think we've heard enough from you, Todd. Your behavior is absolutely unacceptable. Kayla, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I nodded, my eyes never leaving Todd. I'm not doing this out of spite. This is for everyone Todd has hurt, who might hurt in the future. This is about the truth. Todd's bravado faltered entirely. He turned to Mr. Jenkins, desperation creeping into his voice. Please, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Mr. Jenkins shook his head. It looks exactly like what it is, Todd. You're suspended, effective immediately. We will review this thoroughly, but expect a termination, and legal charges might follow. The colleagues murmured in agreement, their trust in Todd completely shattered. Todd looked around the room, realizing that he had lost his allies, his grip on power slipping entirely. I took a step forward, my voice calm but firm. It didn't have to come to this, Todd. But you chose to deceive and manipulate. Actions have consequences. His eyes met mine, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. This isn't over, Kayla. A small, cold smile tugged at my lips. Oh, it is. And it's only fitting. I walked out of the meeting room, feeling their eyes on me, but more importantly, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Todd's reign of terror was crumbling, and justice was on the horizon. As I exited the building, the fresh air hit my face, and I took a deep, liberating breath. My phone buzzed, a message from Jenny. How did it go? I replied simply, It's done. Nana's words came back to me once again, a comforting reminder of the path I had taken to get here. I knew there were still battles to fight, but the biggest one had just been won. Todd would face the fallout of his actions, and I would no longer be a victim. I walked away from that chapter of my life, feeling stronger and more resolved than ever. As I headed home, my new life, free from Todd's shadow, began to take shape. Better days were indeed coming, and I was ready to embrace every single one of them. I stood by the window, watching the snow gently blanket the streets outside. Christmas lights adorned the houses, casting a soft, inviting glow. The sounds of laughter and festive cheer floated through the air, filling me with warmth. Ethan stepped into the room, holding our daughter Emma in his arms. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she pointed to the lights outside. Look, Mommy, it's so pretty. I smiled, reaching out to stroke her hair. Yes, Emma, it really is. Ethan placed Emma down, and she ran off to marvel at the Christmas tree. He came over and slipped an arm around my waist. You okay? He asked gently, his voice full of concern and love. Better than okay, I replied, leaning into him. I never believed Nana when she said happiness would find me after the struggle, but here we are. Ethan kissed my forehead, a reassuring gesture that grounded me. You've been through a lot, Kayla. I'm proud of you. The past year had been transformative. Todd's reputation had taken a massive hit, and he faced legal consequences for his actions. Meanwhile, I had built a new life with Ethan, whose kindness and love had healed so many of my wounds. Emma's laughter filled the room as she decorated the tree with sparkly ornaments. The sight of her pure joy brought a sense of completeness that I had longed for. I joined her, adding ornaments and tinsel, focusing on the present and the future filled with hope. Ethan picked up a small box from under the tree and handed it to me. "Open it," he urged, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. Curious, I unwrapped the box to find a delicate necklace with a locket. Inside was a picture of Emma and a tiny note in Ethan's handwriting, "Forever and always." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "Thank you, Ethan. It's perfect." Emma ran over and gazed at the locket with wide eyes. "So pretty, Mommy," I smiled down at her. "Just like you, darling." Later that evening, as we sat down for dinner, the joy and love in the room were palpable. It was a striking contrast to the tense, suffocating atmosphere I had once known. Ethan held my hand under the table, a small but meaningful gesture that reminded me of how far I'd come. After dinner, we gathered around the fireplace. Ethan read Emma a Christmas story while I watched, feeling immense gratitude. The flames flickered, casting a warm glow, reminiscent of the light Nana always said would find me. Reflecting on the past, I realized that every struggle, every tear, and every moment of despair had led me to this. Nana's words had come to life in ways I couldn't have imagined back then. Happiness didn't just find me. I built it with the strength and resilience I never knew I had. As Ethan finished the story, Emma snuggled into my lap, her tiny hands gripping mine. "I love you, Mommy," she murmured sleepily. "I love you too, Emma. So much," I whispered back, my heart full. Ethan's eyes met mine over Emma's head, filled with love and pride. In his gaze, I saw the future, a future built on love, trust, and the promise of better days. Nana's prediction had come true. Beyond the darkness, I had found not just happiness, but a peace I had thought was lost forever. And with Ethan and Emma by my side, I knew we could overcome anything life threw our way. The new dawn was here, bringing with it all the joy, love, and laughter I had once feared impossible. The journey had been long and painful, but in the end, it was completely worth it. With Ethan and Emma, I was ready to embrace every beautiful moment life had to offer. "Fine, then just do it already." Ethan's voice boomed from the kitchen into the living room, where I sat going through last week's expenses. "Do what?" I fired back, not looking up. "You should transfer the money to her account. You know she's struggling. You gave her almost everything, didn't you?" I closed my laptop, exhaling sharply. "I don't think that's necessary," he said, his tone ice cold. He walked into the room, hand running through his messy hair. "You're really cold-hearted. You know that?" I flicked my eyes to him, challenging him silently. He didn't respond, just shook his head and walked away, leaving the tension in the air. The past few years of our marriage had been smooth. Ethan managed a bustling local cafe. I worked as a software developer. Our routines were mundane but comforting, until yesterday. It all started when our doorbell buzzed while we were having dinner. Ethan went to answer it, and I heard a woman's voice, shaky but familiar. Moments later, Ethan walked into the dining room, his sister Lindsay trailing behind. "Rachel, this is Lindsay," Ethan said softly, barely able to look me in the eye. "She needs a place to stay for a while." Lindsay, whom I had only heard about in passing, stood there looking much older than her 35 years. Her eyes darted around, never settling on anything for too long. She held onto a large duffel bag, knuckles white from the grip. I forced a smile. "Of course, Lindsay. Make yourself comfortable." Hours later, Ethan and Lindsay were talking in the kitchen while I sat stiffly on the couch, pretending to watch a show. Their voices were hushed, but I could catch bits and pieces. Something about financial distress, emotional burnout. None of it felt right. "So, how long do you think she's staying?" I asked Ethan as we got ready for bed. "Not sure," he responded, his voice tired. "Just until she gets back on her feet." I nodded, turning off the bedside lamp. Something gnawed at me, a sense of unease I couldn't shake off. The next morning, our usual routine was disrupted. Lindsay was already in the kitchen, making herself at home. "Good morning, Rachel," she greeted with an unsettlingly cheerful tone. "Morning, Lindsay," I replied, putting on a neutral mask. I grabbed my coffee and headed to my office, giving Ethan a quick peck on the cheek. "See you tonight." Work was my solace. The lines of code calmed my racing thoughts, but Lindsay's sudden appearance crept in now and then. Every time I tried to focus, the image of her standing limply at our doorstep popped into my mind. When I returned home, I found Ethan and Lindsay laughing over some old stories. They didn't notice me come in. The scent of dinner wafted through the air, but I felt no appetite. "Anything I need to know about your sister's return?" I asked Ethan later that night. He sighed heavily. "Lindsay's been through a lot, job losses, a rough divorce. She just needs time." "But why now?" I pressed. "Why not reach out sooner?" "Rachel, please," he almost pleaded, "just give her a chance." I closed my eyes, biting my lip. There was more to Lindsay's story, more than Ethan wanted to admit. I decided to keep a close eye on her. For now, I would play the supportive wife, but I knew I'd need to dig deeper. Lindsay was a storm brewing, and I could sense that she would disrupt the calm we had built. Over the next few days, my discomfort about Lindsay's presence only grew. Ethan's sister settled in like she had never left. I observed, my senses tuned to each interaction, every little change in the atmosphere of our home. Tensions were already simmering beneath the surface. One morning, I found Lindsay lounging on the sofa, remote in hand, feet propped up on the coffee table. "Rachel, could you pass me some water?" she asked, not even glancing away from the TV. I bit back a sharp retort, grabbed a glass of water, and handed it to her. "Here," I said, my voice clipped. "Thanks," she replied absent-mindedly. Ethan wasn't aware of these small moments. Whenever he was around, Lindsay transformed into the picture of humility, polite, and grateful. But when we were alone, a different side of her emerged. One evening, after dinner, Ethan had to rush back to the cafe to handle a staffing issue. Lindsay and I were left alone. I cleaned up, and she sat at the table flipping through a magazine. "So, Rachel, have you thought about letting me borrow your car, just for a couple of days till I get things sorted?" Lindsay asked, her tone casual but laced with expectation. "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We need it for work." "Right," she said, smirking slightly. "Ethan mentioned your job. A software developer, huh? Sounds demanding." "It is," I said, sensing some form of judgment in her words. "Must be nice," she added, not looking up. "Having a stable job and all." "I work hard for it," I countered, wiping the table a little too forcefully. "I'm sure you do," she returned, her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. "Just don't be too harsh on Ethan. He's always been a bit naive, you know." My hands froze, but I didn't rise to the bait. I finished my task in silence, leaving her still seated at the table. That night, as Ethan and I climbed into bed, I could feel the invisible weight of an impending storm. Another argument flared between Ethan and me a few days later. "Lindsay needs our support," he insisted, his patience wearing thin. "It's not about support," I argued back. "It's about boundaries. She's becoming a burden." "She's my sister, Rachel. We can't just throw her out because she's inconvenient," he stated firmly. In the days that followed, Lindsay's behavior only became more problematic. She stayed up late, making noise that kept us awake. I'd find the kitchen a mess after she cooked. She seemed to have little regard for the home we had so carefully maintained. "Ethan, you have to talk to her," I said one night, frustration boiling over. "I will, I promise," he said, tiredly rubbing his temples. But I knew he wouldn't. His blind spot for his sister was too large. One particularly exhausting evening, after catching Lindsay rummaging through my belongings in our bedroom, I had to force myself to stay calm. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Just looking for some socks," she replied innocently, though her eyes told a different story. "We have a guest room for a reason, Lindsay. Please respect our space," I said, my voice hard. Lindsay didn't respond, just gave me a small smile that didn't reach her eyes and walked out. As I lay in bed that night, Ethan asleep beside me, I knew I needed to take action. Lindsay was becoming more than just a nuisance. She was a threat to the peace and stability of our home, and I wasn't going to let her tear everything apart. It was just a matter of how much more I could take before reaching my breaking point. The tension in the house was as sharp as a knife edge. Ethan was drifting away, drawn into Lindsay's world of manipulation. It was subtle at first, small remarks and suggestions, but over time it became clear Lindsay had a plan. One Saturday morning, Ethan sat down next to me with a sigh. "Rachel, Lindsay thinks she's overstaying her welcome," he began cautiously. "Does she?" I replied, folding my arms. "She suggested that maybe we could help her get back on her feet by giving her some financial help," he said, looking uneasy. "No, Ethan?" She's been here for weeks, and all she's done is create chaos, I replied sharply. She needs to show some initiative and find a job. Later, I overheard Lindsay talking to Ethan in the kitchen. Ethan, I feel like a burden, but Rachel? She's being so cold, she said softly, sniffling as if she was on the verge of tears. She's just stressed, Linz, Ethan replied, trying to console her. I don't think she wants me here. I'll leave if that's what you both want, she said, sounding pitiful. Ethan hesitated. No, we'll figure something out. Rachel just needs time. That evening, I found Lindsay rifling through our living room drawers. What are you looking for, Lindsay? I asked pointedly. I was just trying to find a pen, she responded, a hint of defiance in her eyes. Next time, ask, I said. She shrugged, the smirk playing on her lips, ever so slight, but I caught it. Dinner was a silent affair until Lindsay decided to stir the pot further. You know, Ethan, I overheard some people at the cafe talking. They said Rachel spends a lot of time with her male colleagues after work, she said casually, setting her fork down and giving me a sideways glance. I felt the accusation like a slap. Excuse me? I snapped. Oh, did I misunderstand? My mistake, she said, feigning innocence. Ethan looked troubled, his eyes darting between Lindsay and me. Rachel, is there something I should know? He asked, his voice low. Seriously, Ethan, you're going to believe this nonsense? I replied, my frustration hitting its peak. Lindsay's smirk returned. I'm sorry. I must have misheard, she added, pouring fuel on the fire. After dinner, I cornered Ethan. You know she's trying to turn you against me, right? I said, my voice trembling with anger. She's just stressed, Rachel. She didn't mean it, he said, rubbing his forehead. Open your eyes, Ethan. She's manipulating you. I shouted it without caring if Lindsay could hear. The argument spiraled with me accusing and Ethan defending. Lindsay's presence in our home became the tipping point for constant stress and bickering between us. One evening, I returned home to find Lindsay sprawled on the couch, chatting on her phone. Yeah, they're out of town this weekend, she said, her eyes meeting mine before quickly looking away. Who are you talking to? I demanded. She ended the call abruptly. Just a friend, she said, standing up. Just a friend? Or are you making plans behind our backs? I shot back. Calm down, Rachel. It's nothing, she replied, but there was a knowing glint in her eyes. That night, as I tried to sleep beside an oblivious Ethan, I knew I was reaching my limit. Her subtle digs, the way she wrapped Ethan around her finger, it all pushed me closer to the edge. The house had turned into a battleground, and I was out of patience. Time was running out, and something had to change. I couldn't sit back and let Lindsay poison our lives any longer. It was time to take control before she destroyed everything we had built. The breaking point came faster than I expected. I came home to find Lindsay seated at the dining table, Ethan nowhere in sight. She looked up with a sly smile. Rachel, you're home early, she said, her voice tinged with mock surprise. Before I could respond, she added, I was hoping we could talk. I dropped my bag, feeling the tension coil in my stomach. What's there to talk about, Lindsay? She leaned back, folding her arms. I need money, she said bluntly. A lot of it. I have debts that won't go away on their own. I stared at her, disbelief and rage mingling. How much are you talking about? 10,000 should do, she replied, her tone casual. I promise I'll pay you back once I'm on my feet. No way, I said, shaking my head. That's out of the question. Lindsay's face hardened. Ethan will do it if you won't, she said, eyes narrowing. And what makes you think he'll go behind my back? I challenged. She shrugged. You'd be surprised what a brother would do for his sister. At that moment, Ethan walked in, holding groceries. He looked between us, sensing the hostility. What's going on? Lindsay wants $10,000, I said, not taking my eyes off her. Ethan's face went pale. That's a lot of money, Linz. I need it, Ethan. Desperately. Lindsay pleaded, turning her gaze on him with those manipulative eyes. Would you really leave me stranded? Ethan, we can't. This has to stop, I said firmly. We'll figure something out, Lindsay, he told her, avoiding my gaze. I felt a wave of fury. Are you seriously considering this? Lindsay turned to me, her voice dripping with venom. You don't control him, Rachel. I grabbed my coat. We'll talk about this later, Ethan. I need some air. I stormed out, my mind racing. As I walked, I knew something had to change. Lindsay was tearing us apart, and Ethan was blind to it. Later, Ethan and I confronted each other in the kitchen. We can't keep going like this, I said, my voice raw. She needs to leave. Rachel, she's my sister, Ethan shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I can't just abandon her. Then maybe it's time to choose, I said quietly. Her or us? His eyes flashed with pain and indecision. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious, Ethan. She's destroying our marriage. That night, I began digging into Lindsay's past. I called a friend who worked in finance, asking for any information on Lindsay's dealings. The results were shocking. Lindsay had been involved in several financial scams, always slipping away before being caught. Armed with this evidence, I knew I had to confront Ethan. As we sat down the following evening, I laid out what I'd found. I don't believe it, he said, shaking his head. Lindsay wouldn't do this. There's more, I pressed. She's been manipulating you for years. Look at the pattern. Ethan looked at the papers, his face crumbling. This can't be true. It is, I said gently. You need to see her for who she really is. Torn between his loyalty to his sister and the undeniable evidence before him, Ethan looked lost. What do we do? We need to confront her, I said. She can't stay here. Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of the truth settling in. We walked to the living room together, ready to face Lindsay and expose her deceit. This confrontation would be the turning point, one way or another. Ethan and I entered the living room, ready for the confrontation. Lindsay was scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of the storm about to crash down on her. Lindsay, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady. Lindsay looked up, an eyebrow raised. What's this about? Ethan took a deep breath. Rachel found something out. We need to discuss it. About what? She asked, her face an image of manufactured innocence. I stepped forward, handing her the documents. Your financial history, the scams, the lies. Her eyes flicked over the pages. For a moment, her mask slipped, and fear flashed across her face. But she quickly recovered. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain. Enough, Lindsay, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I've been defending you, but these facts don't lie. You're really going to believe her over me? Lindsay shot back, eyes narrowing. Your own sister? Ethan's face contorted with pain. Why, Lindsay? Why did you do this? She dropped the documents and stood up, anger radiating from her. What choice did I have? You wouldn't understand. You've always had everything handed to you. That's not true, Ethan said, shaking his head. Lindsay's laugh was cold. Isn't it? Mom and Dad doted on you while I was left picking up the pieces. You owe me, Ethan. You owe me for all those years. No, Ethan said, with a newfound strength. I owe you nothing for your deceit. I stepped in. It's time for you to leave, Lindsay. You've overstayed your welcome and soured our home. You think you're so perfect, Lindsay spat, turning her fury on me. This isn't over. I held her gaze. Yes, it is. Pack your bags and leave. Ethan stood beside me, his resolve now hardened. She's right. It's time to go. Lindsay looked between us, realizing she had lost. She grabbed her bag, stuffing her belongings inside. You'll regret this, both of you, she said, her voice full of venom. We'll survive, Ethan replied, his voice steady. As she walked out the door, Lindsay turned one last time, her eyes flashing with hatred. I'll be back, she promised. Just go, I said, shutting the door behind her. The house felt lighter immediately, but the damage lingered in the air. Ethan slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. How did it go so wrong? I sat beside him, placing a hand on his back. We'll get through this, I said softly. We'll rebuild. He looked up, eyes filled with remorse. I should have seen it. I'm so sorry, Rachel. We both missed the signs, I acknowledged, but now we move forward. The next days were difficult. We had to confront the fallout of Lindsay's stay and the rift it had caused. Ethan and I avoided deep conversations, focusing on mundane tasks and routines. One morning, as we sat in silence over breakfast, Ethan spoke up. I think we need help. Counseling, maybe. I looked at him, recognizing the sincerity in his eyes. I agree, I said. We can't heal this alone. Taking his hand, we made the decision to seek professional help. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were committed to finding our way back to each other, repairing what Lindsay had tried to destroy. The therapist's office was a neutral haven, beige walls and soft lighting, creating a calming atmosphere. Dr. Sandra Green, our therapist, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a steady demeanor. Ethan and I sat on the couch, feet almost touching but not quite. So what brings you both here today? Dr. Green asked, looking between us. Ethan took a deep breath. We need help. My sister Lindsay has caused a lot of turmoil in our marriage. We need to find a way to heal. Dr. Green nodded. Tell me about Lindsay and what happened. I shared the events of the past few weeks, from Lindsay's arrival to the discovery of her deceit. Dr. Green listened intently, making notes occasionally. When I finished, Ethan added, I feel guilty. I let her manipulate me, and it nearly ruined us. Dr. Green put down her pen. Let's focus on rebuilding trust. It's important to address the emotions you're both feeling. Through therapy sessions, we worked on our communication. We learned to express our feelings without anger and to listen without judgment. It was grueling, but I began to see glimpses of the bond we once had. One evening, after a particularly challenging session, Ethan and I sat in the living room, a comfortable silence between us. Thank you for sticking with this, he said quietly. I'm committed to us, Ethan. We can get through this, I replied, squeezing his hand. As the weeks passed, I found myself slowly letting go of the resentment I held towards Lindsay. However, one day, a phone call shattered our fragile peace. Ethan answered and immediately went pale. Lindsay, what do you want? He asked, his voice strained. I could hear her voice shrill and demanding through the phone. I need help, Ethan. I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Ethan looked at me, conflicted. I shook my head firmly. No, Ethan. We can't go through this again. You heard Rachel. You can't drag us down anymore, he said into the phone. You can't do this to me, Lindsay screamed. I'm your sister. Lindsay, you need to sort out your own life. We're done, Ethan said, ending the call. He looked at me, anguish etched on his face. I feel terrible, but I know it's for the best. You did the right thing, I said, embracing him. She needs to learn to stand on her own. Days turned into weeks, and slowly our lives returned to a semblance of normal. Then, one evening, we received another call, this time from Ethan's old friend, Mark. Ethan, I hate to be the one to tell you, but Lindsay is in bad shape. She got mixed up with some dangerous people. Ethan's face went white. What do you mean? He asked, his voice trembling. She's been trying to con people, and it backfired badly. She's looking for help, but honestly, I don't know how much anyone can do now. Ethan hung up the phone, sitting down heavily. This is what I was afraid of. I sat next to him. It's harsh, but Lindsay's choices led her here. We learned that Lindsay had been arrested, seeking help too late, entangled in a mess of her own making. Ethan and I watched, both saddened and relieved. As we continued our therapy, Dr. Green helped us focus on moving forward. You can't change the past, she said, but you can decide how it shapes your future. Ethan and I took her words to heart. We worked harder on our relationship, setting clear boundaries and learning to trust again. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, we grew stronger. While Lindsay's downfall was tragic, it became a catalyst for understanding and growth in our marriage. Together, we faced the shadows of betrayal and began crafting a new chapter, one built on the lessons we'd learned and the resilience we discovered within ourselves. Ethan and I walked into Dr. Green's office for what felt like the 100th time. Today felt different. There was a heaviness, the knowledge that we were on the brink of a major decision. Rachel, Ethan, how are you both? Dr. Green asked, her warm smile suggesting she already knew the complexity of our feelings. Confused, conflicted, I admitted, but we're here to figure it out. Ethan nodded. We need clarity. Dr. Green put her pen down. Let's talk about what you need from each other moving forward. I took a deep breath. I need to feel safe in our relationship, Ethan. No more surprises, no more manipulations from outside influences. Ethan reached for my hand, and I need to know you're with me, Rachel, through thick and thin. I squeezed his hand. Always, if it means we can rebuild trust. Dr. Green nodded approvingly. It sounds like you're ready to make some difficult choices. What about Lindsay's influence? This was the moment. I turned to Ethan. Lindsay can't be a part of our lives if we're going to heal. She needs to seek professional help. Ethan swallowed hard. He looked at me, anguish clear on his face, but eventually nodded. It's what we have to do. That evening, back at home, Ethan made the call. It was short and definitive. Lindsay, this is how it has to be. You need to get professional help. We can't be involved anymore. I watched him hang up, feeling both relief and sorrow. I hope she gets the help she needs, Ethan said wearily, sinking into the couch. We did everything we could, I reassured him. As the days turned into weeks, we focused on healing. Every morning, I would catch Ethan looking reflective, but he would also smile more easily. One Saturday morning, Ethan suggested, "Let's go for a walk, just the two of us." We walked hand in hand through a nearby park, the crisp autumn air invigorating us. "I missed this," I admitted. "Me too," Ethan said, squeezing my hand. "We'll make new memories, Rachel, better ones." Our walks became a ritual, a way to reconnect and reaffirm our commitment to each other. One afternoon, we decided to visit Jamie, my close friend and confidant, who had been supportive through this ordeal. "Come in, you guys," Jamie greeted us warmly, leading us into her cozy living room. "How are things?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "We're taking it one day at a time," I said honestly. Jamie gave a knowing nod. "You've both been through the ringer. It's good to see you're working on it." We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and sharing stories. It was a relief to be with friends who supported our journey. Later, when we were home, Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with determination. "I want us to keep growing, Rachel. No more shadows." "Agreed," I said, feeling the weight of his words. No more shadows. We continued our sessions with Dr. Green, each one bringing us closer and helping us rebuild. We learned to trust again, not just in each other, but in our future. Eventually, we felt strong enough to talk about the next steps. "We should consider renewing our vows," Ethan suggested one day. "A fresh start." I smiled at the idea. "I think that's a wonderful idea." As we stood in front of a small group of friends and family, reaffirming our commitment, I felt the weight lift completely. We had faced betrayal, confronted our deepest fears, and come out stronger. To new beginnings we toasted, clinking our glasses together. In that moment, I knew that the shadows of betrayal had finally lifted, giving way to the bright promise of a future we would build together, free from the darkness of the past. The fresh start Ethan and I had hoped for was beginning to take shape. We focused on our healing, attending couples therapy regularly, and working on our communication. Each passing day brought us a little closer. One afternoon, as we were heading to our therapy session, Ethan's phone rang. It was his old friend, Mark again. Ethan answered, his face growing tense as he listened. "What's going on?" I asked after he ended the call. "Lindsay's in deeper trouble," Ethan said, his voice heavy. "She tried to con someone, and they didn't take it well. She's in real danger, Rachel." I felt a pang of anger mixed with pity. "What are we supposed to do about it?" Ethan sighed. "I don't know, but we can't go back to that chaos. She needs to face the consequences." We went through our therapy session, trying to stay focused, but I could see the worry etched on Ethan's face. Dr. Green noticed it too. "Ethan, what's troubling you today?" she asked gently. "Lindsay's in trouble again," he admitted. "I feel guilty for cutting her off, but I also know we can't help her anymore." Dr. Green nodded empathetically. "It's natural to feel conflicted, but remember why you made that decision. You need to protect your own well-being." After the session, we walked in silence, each lost in our thoughts. "Do you think she'll ever change?" Ethan asked suddenly. "I hope so, for her sake," I replied, squeezing his hand. "But we've done all we can." A few days later, we received a call from the local police. Lindsay had been arrested again, this time for fraud. I watched as Ethan took the call, his face a mask of pain and resignation. "Thank you, officer," he said before hanging up. "Lindsay's being held on serious charges." I reached out, holding his hand. "We have to let her face the music, Ethan." "I know," he said, tears welling up, "but it hurts." Time passed, and Lindsay's troubles remained a distant shadow. Ethan and I continued to strengthen our bond, finding joy in the simple things we once took for granted. We decided to attend a couples retreat recommended by Dr. Green. "Welcome, everyone," the retreat facilitator greeted us warmly. "This weekend is about reconnecting, rebuilding trust, and finding joy in your partnership." We participated in exercises designed to foster communication and understanding. One activity involved writing letters to each other, expressing our hopes and fears. "Dear Ethan," I began, pouring my heart onto the paper. "I admire your strength and your willingness to fight for us. We've faced so much, but I believe in our future together." When we exchanged letters, I saw tears in Ethan's eyes. "Rachel, your words mean everything to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your letter is beautiful, Ethan," I replied, my own tears falling. By the end of the retreat, we felt more connected than ever. We stood on a hill overlooking a serene lake, holding hands as the sun set. "This feels like a new beginning," Ethan said softly. "It does," I agreed. "We've come so far." Back home, the weeks turned into months, our relationship growing stronger. We began planning future projects together, talking about travel, hobbies, and even starting a family someday. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Ethan turned to me. "I never thought we'd make it through all of this," he admitted. "But we did," I said, smiling, "and we're stronger for it." We received one final piece of news about Lindsay. She had finally checked herself into a rehabilitation program, facing the reality of her actions. "Maybe this is the turning point she needs," Ethan said hopefully. "Let's hope so," I replied, grateful for the closure. With each day, we moved forward, creating a future built on resilience and love. Together, we had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and ready for whatever lay ahead. As we looked toward the horizon, we knew that the shadows of betrayal had finally faded, leaving only the bright promise of new beginnings. I froze at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The sounds coming from our bedroom were unmistakable, a woman's giggle followed by my husband Ted's low chuckle. My hands trembled as I gripped the banister, willing myself to move. "Oh, Ted," a breathy voice cooed. "You're so bad." I felt bile rise in my throat. This couldn't be happening, not in our home, not in our bed. With shaky steps, I approached the partially open door. I should have turned and run, pretended I'd never heard a thing. But my body moved of its own accord, pushing the door wide. The sight before me knocked the wind from my lungs. Ted, my husband of 15 years, tangled in our sheets with a woman I recognized as Lisa from his office. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "Natalie," Ted scrambled to cover himself, nearly tumbling off the bed. I can explain." I stood frozen, unable to form words as Lisa gathered her clothes, face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, ducking past me and fleeing down the stairs. The slam of the front door jolted me back to reality. I turned to Ted, who was hastily pulling on his pants. "Explain?" I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Explain how you could do this to me? To our family?" Ted ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Natalie, please. It's not what you think." "Not what I think." My voice rose, anger finally breaking through the shock. "I just caught you in bed with another woman, in our home." "Keep your voice down," Ted hissed. "The boys might hear." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, now you're worried about the boys? Where was that concern when you were screwing your coworker?" Ted's face hardened. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of obsessing over the kids all the time, this wouldn't have happened." His words hit me like a slap. "Are you seriously blaming me for your affair?" "It's not an affair," Ted insisted. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing." "Don't lie to me," I spat. "I've seen the way you look at her at company parties. How long has this been going on?" Ted's silence was all the answer I needed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs no longer able to support me. "I gave up everything for you," I whispered. "My career, my independence, and this is how you repay me?" "Natalie, please." Ted knelt before me, reaching for my hands. I jerked away from his touch. "We can work through this, for the boys' sake." The mention of our children snapped something inside me. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking Ted over. "Don't you dare use our sons as an excuse," I snarled. "You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed." I stormed out of the room, Ted's pleas falling on deaf ears. In a daze, I found myself in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as sobs racked my body. The sound of small feet on the stairs made me hastily wipe my eyes. 10-year-old Jake appeared in the doorway, his younger brother Ethan close behind. "Mom?" Jake's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay? We heard yelling." I forced a smile, my heart breaking at the worry in his eyes. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Mommy and Daddy just had a little disagreement." Jake didn't look convinced, but nodded slowly. "Okay, can we have some ice cream?" "Sure," I said, grateful for the distraction. As I scooped Rocky Road into bowls, my mind raced. What was I going to do? How could I face Ted after this? And most importantly, how would I protect my boys from the fallout of their father's betrayal? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stared at the framed photo on my nightstand, a reminder of happier times. Ted and I on our wedding day, faces beaming with hope and love. How quickly things had changed. The bedroom door creaked open, and Ted's reflection appeared in the mirror. "Natalie, we need to talk," I turned, steeling myself. "About what? How you destroyed our marriage." Ted sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Remember how good we used to be together?" His words transported me back to our early days. I'd been a rising star at my marketing firm, burning the midnight oil to climb the corporate ladder. Then I met Ted. "You swept me off my feet," I said softly. "Made me believe in fairy tales." Ted's eyes lit up. "We can have that again. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, the spell broken. "No, Ted, you don't get it. This isn't just about the affair. It's about everything that led to it." "What do you mean?" "Remember when you convinced me to quit my job?" I asked, anger rising. "You promised to take care of me, said we'd be partners, but that's not what happened, is it?" Ted's face darkened. "I provide for this family. What more do you want?" "A husband who respects me," I shot back. "Who doesn't treat me like a glorified maid and nanny?" "That's not fair," Ted protested. "I work hard to give you and the boys everything." "Everything except your time and attention," I countered. "When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or the kids' schedules?" Ted fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. "I gave up my career for you," I continued, years of resentment pouring out. "And what did I get in return? A husband who's never home, who belittles my contributions, who seeks comfort in another woman's arms." "I said I was sorry about Lisa," Ted mumbled. "Sorry isn't enough," I exploded. "Do you have any idea how it feels to discover your husband's betrayal in your own home? To realize that the life you've built is a lie?" Ted's jaw clenched. "You're not innocent in this, Natalie. You've been distant for years, always focused on the kids, never making time for us." His words hit like a punch to the gut. "Are you seriously blaming me for your affair?" "I'm saying we're both responsible for the state of our marriage," Ted replied, his voice rising. "But you're acting like I'm the only one at fault here." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize neglecting you justified sleeping with your coworker." "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Ted growled. "I'm trying to have an honest conversation here, but you're twisting everything I say." "Honest?" I scoffed. "That's rich coming from you. How long would you have continued lying to me if I hadn't caught you?" Ted's silence spoke volumes. "That's what I thought," I said, turning away. "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight." "Natalie, please," Ted pleaded. "We can work through this, for the boys' sake if nothing else." I whirled back to face him, fury blazing in my chest. "Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed." Ted's face crumpled. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you, Natalie. I love our family. Please give me another chance." For a moment, I wavered. The pain in his eyes was genuine, and part of me longed to believe him. But then I remembered the sounds of his laughter with Lisa, the casual way he'd blamed me for his infidelity. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to think, to figure out what I want. Can you give me that?" Ted nodded slowly. "Whatever you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." As he left the room, I sank onto the bed, my mind reeling. Could we salvage our marriage? Did I even want to try? One thing was certain, I couldn't continue living in this limbo. Something had to change, and soon. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers in front of me. The weight of my decision pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. A week had passed since I'd caught Ted with Lisa, and the wound still felt raw. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Ted walked in, his eyes immediately landing on the papers. "What's this?" he asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath. "I think you know, Ted. I can't do this anymore." His face contorted with anger. "You're seriously considering divorce? After everything we've been through?" "Everything we've been through?" I echoed, incredulous. "You mean your affair?" Ted slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. "For God's sake, Natalie, I made a mistake. How many times do I have to apologize? It's not just about the affair," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "It's about years of neglect, of feeling like I don't matter." "That's not fair," Ted growled. "I've provided for this family, given you everything you could want. Except respect," I shot back, "except partnership." Ted's eyes narrowed. "Is that what this is about? You feeling unappreciated? Maybe if you'd put as much effort into our marriage as you did into being a martyr, we wouldn't be in this mess. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up, hands shaking. Get out. This is my house, Ted sneered. You don't get to tell me what to do. Your house? I laughed bitterly. The one I've kept running while you were off playing house with your mistress? Ted's face flushed with rage. He took a step toward me, and for a moment I was afraid he might strike me. Instead, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed into the chair, tears streaming down my face. How had we come to this? The man I'd loved, the father of my children, now a stranger filled with anger and resentment. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my sister, Leah. How are you holding up? Want to talk? Relief washed over me. I needed my big sister now more than ever. An hour later, I sat on Leah's couch, pouring out my heart. She listened patiently, her kind eyes filled with concern. Oh, Natalie, she sighed when I finished. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but honey, you need to stand up for yourself. Ted doesn't get to dictate your worth. I nodded, wiping away tears. I know, but it's hard. We've been together so long, and the boys. Leah took my hands in hers. Listen to me. You deserve happiness. You deserve respect, and your boys deserve to see their mother valued and strong. But what if I can't do it? I whispered. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Leah said firmly. You're one of the strongest women I know. You just need to remember that. As I drove home, Leah's words echoed in my mind. She was right. I'd let Ted chip away at my confidence for too long. It was time to reclaim my power. I walked into the house, steeling myself for another confrontation. But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Ted sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. You're right, I've been a terrible husband. I don't deserve you. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But then I remembered Leah's words. You're right, I said quietly. You don't deserve me. Not anymore. Ted's face crumpled. Natalie, please, I'll do anything. Go to counseling, quit my job, whatever you want. I shook my head. It's too late, Ted. I've made my decision. As I turned to leave the room, Ted called out, desperation in his voice. What about the boys? Don't they deserve a chance at a whole family? I paused, my hand on the doorframe. They deserve parents who respect each other, who show them what real love looks like. I looked back at him, my voice steady. And that's what I intend to give them, with or without you. With those words, I walked away, leaving Ted and the remnants of our broken marriage behind. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. My future, on my own terms. I watched the boys' faces as we pulled up to Leah's house, our car packed with hastily thrown-together suitcases. Jake, at 10, wore a frown of confusion. 6-year-old Ethan's eyes were wide with excitement at the prospect of a vacation at Aunt Leah's. Mom, why isn't Dad coming? Jake asked as we unloaded the car. I swallowed hard. Dad needs to stay at our house for work, sweetie. We're going to have a little break here with Aunt Leah. Jake's frown deepened, but he didn't press further. I silently thanked God for small mercies. Leah enveloped us in a warm hug as we entered. Welcome, troops. I've got the guest rooms all set up for you. As the boys explored the house, Leah pulled me aside. How are you holding up? I felt my carefully constructed facade crumble. I don't know how I'm going to do this, Leah. I haven't worked in years. How am I supposed to support the boys on my own? Leah squeezed my hand. One step at a time, sis. Remember Dana from your old job? She called earlier asking about you. Said there might be some freelance work available if you're interested. Hope fluttered in my chest. Really? I haven't done marketing in so long. You're still sharp as a tack, Leah insisted. Give her a call. What have you got to lose? That night, after the boys were asleep, I dialed Dana's number with trembling fingers. Natalie? Dana's warm voice brought back memories of late nights brainstorming campaigns. I'm so glad you called. How are you? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I'm going through some changes. Leah mentioned you might have some work? Absolutely, Dana said. We've got a new client who needs a fresh perspective. It's remote work, perfect for juggling with family commitments. My heart raced. That sounds amazing, Dana, but it's been years since I've worked. I'm not sure I'm qualified anymore. Dana's laugh was reassuring. Natalie, you were one of the best in the business. That talent doesn't just disappear. Why don't you start with a small project and see how it goes? We chatted for an hour, discussing the project and catching up. By the time we hung up, I felt a glimmer of my old confidence returning. The next morning, I woke early to start work before the boys were up. As I logged into my laptop, a notification popped up, an email from Ted. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Natalie, I can't believe you just left like that. What about our family, our vows? You're abandoning your duties as a wife and mother. The boys need stability, not your selfish whims. Come home immediately, or there will be consequences. Ted, rage boiled in my veins. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he had the audacity to accuse me of abandonment? I was halfway through a scathing reply when Ethan's sleepy voice interrupted me. Mommy, can we have pancakes? I closed the laptop, pushing thoughts of Ted aside. Of course, sweetie. Let's wake up Jake and Aunt Leah and make it a pancake party. As we gathered in Leah's sunny kitchen, the boys giggling as they mixed batter and made a mess, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was what mattered, not Ted's accusations or my fears about the future. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. Where are you? We need to talk. Now. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to lash out, to hurt him as he'd hurt me. But as I watched the boys playing in Leah's backyard, I knew I had to be the bigger person. I typed out a simple response. We're safe. I'll have my lawyer contact you about arrangements for the boys. As I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. It wouldn't be easy, but with Leah's support and this new opportunity with Dana, I finally felt hope for the future. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a silent promise to myself and my sons. We would not just survive this, we would thrive. I was in the middle of a conference call with Dana and our new client when the doorbell rang. Leah answered it, and moments later I heard raised voices from the foyer. Where is she? Ted's angry voice carried through the house. My heart raced. I quickly muted my microphone and whispered to Dana, Family emergency. I'll call you back. Stepping into the hallway, I saw Ted towering over Leah, his face red with anger. Ted, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What are you doing here? He whirled to face me. What am I doing here? What are you doing here, Natalie? You can't just take the boys and disappear. I told you we were safe, I replied, fighting to keep my voice calm. I needed time to think. Ted scoffed. Think about what? How to destroy our family. Leah stepped between us. I think you should leave, Ted. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. Stay out of this, Leah, Ted snapped. This is between me and my wife. Don't talk to her like that, I said, anger rising in my chest. Leah's been more supportive than you've been in years. Ted's eyes narrowed. Oh, so that's what this is about? You feeling unsupported? I work my ass off to provide for this family, and this is the thanks I get. Provide? I laughed bitterly. You mean control. You've spent years making me dependent on you, isolating me from my career, my friends. I gave you everything, Ted shouted. A beautiful home, vacations, the best schools for the boys, and you throw it all away for what? Some misguided notion of independence? The boys appeared at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and frightened. Seeing them, I made a decision. Boys, go to your room, I said firmly. Mom and Dad need to talk. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to Ted. This isn't working. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us. Ted's face paled. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I replied. I've already spoken to a lawyer. A lawyer? Ted's voice rose again. So you've been planning this all along? While I've been trying to save our marriage? I shook my head. Save our marriage? By blaming me for your affair? By trying to control my every move? I made a mistake with Lisa, Ted said, his tone softening. But I love you, Natalie. We can work this out. For a moment, I wavered. Then I remembered the years of neglect, the constant belittling, the way he'd made me doubt myself. No, Ted, I said quietly. We can't. It's too late. Ted's face hardened. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I'll see you in court. Don't expect to take me for everything I'm worth. This isn't about money, I replied. It's about respect, something you clearly don't understand. As Ted stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah wrapped me in a hug. "I'm proud of you, sis," she whispered. Upstairs, I found the boys huddled together on Jake's bed. "Is Dad gone?" Ethan asked, his voice small. I sat down, pulling them both close. "Yes, sweetie, Dad's gone home." "Are we going back?" Jake asked. I took a deep breath. "No, honey, we're going to stay here with Aunt Leah for a while. Dad and we need some time apart." "Are you getting divorced?" Jake's eyes filled with tears. My heart broke, but I knew I had to be honest. "Yes, sweetheart, but I want you both to know that this doesn't change how much we love you. You're the most important things in our lives." As I held my boys, comforting them through their tears, I felt a surge of determination. I would build a new life for us, one filled with love, respect, and independence. It wouldn't be easy, but looking at Jake and Ethan, I knew it would be worth it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. "This isn't over. I'll fight you every step of the way." I stared at the screen, a mix of fear and resolve washing over me. Then I typed out a response. "Bring it on. I'm done being your doormat." As I hit send, I knew there was no turning back. The battle for my freedom and my children's future had begun. 6 months had passed since I'd left Ted, and life had taken on a new rhythm. I'd thrown myself into work, quickly becoming one of Dana's most valuable freelancers. The boys were settling into their new school, making friends and slowly healing from the upheaval of our family. I was in the middle of a crucial client presentation when my phone buzzed insistently. Ignoring it, I focused on my pitch. As soon as I ended the call, I saw a flurry of missed calls and texts from Leah. "Natalie, call me ASAP. It's about Ted." My heart raced as I dialed her number. "Leah, what's wrong?" "Ted's here," she said, her voice tight. "He's demanding to see the boys, says he has court papers." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What? No, that's impossible. We have a custody agreement." "He's saying you violated it by moving without his consent. Natalie, he's threatening to take the boys." Panic clawed at my throat. "I'm on my way. Don't let him near them." I sped to Leah's house, my mind whirling. How could this be happening? We'd been so careful with the legal arrangements. As I pulled up, I saw Ted's car in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation. The scene inside was chaos. Ted stood in the living room waving papers and shouting. Leah stood between him and the stairs, where I could hear the boys crying. "Ted, stop this!" I yelled, slamming the door behind me. "You're scaring the children." He whirled to face me, eyes blazing. "You've left me no choice, Natalie. You think you can just take my sons and cut me out of their lives?" "That's not what I'm doing," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We have an agreement. You see them every other weekend." "An agreement you broke when you moved them without my permission," Ted snarled. "I have rights, and I'm going to exercise them." I snatched the papers from his hand, scanning them quickly. My blood ran cold. He was right. There was a clause about relocating without mutual consent. "This is low, even for you," I hissed, "using the boys as pawns in your game." Ted's face softened slightly. "I don't want to do this, Natalie. Come home. We can work this out." For a moment, I wavered. The thought of losing my children was unbearable. But then I remembered why I'd left. The years of emotional abuse, the affair, the way he'd slowly chipped away at my self-worth. "No," I said firmly. "We're not coming back. This is our home now." Ted's expression hardened. "Fine, then I'll see you in court. I'll fight for full custody if I have to." As he stormed out, I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking. Leah sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. "I can't lose them, Leah." "We'll figure it out," she said. "I'll call my lawyer friend. We'll fight this." I nodded, trying to believe her words. But doubt gnawed at me. How could I compete with Ted's resources? His connections? The sound of small feet on the stairs made me look up. Jake and Ethan stood there, tears streaking their faces. "Mom?" Jake's voice trembled. "Are we going to have to live with Dad?" I held out my arms, and they ran to me. Holding them close, I made a silent vow. I would not let Ted win. I would not let him destroy the new life we'd built. "No, sweetie," I said. My voice stronger than I felt. "We're staying right here. I promise." As I comforted my boys, my mind raced. I needed a plan. I needed to prove I could provide for them, that this new life was better for everyone. My phone buzzed, a text from Dana. "Client loved your pitch. They want to offer you a full-time position." I stared at the screen, a glimmer of hope piercing through the darkness. This could be it, the key to securing our future. Looking at my sons, then at Leah, I felt a surge of determination. Ted might have money and power, but I had love, resilience, and a newfound strength he couldn't begin to understand. The battle for my children's future had begun, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. 1 year after leaving Ted, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the timid housewife, replaced by a confident professional in a crisp blazer. I'd not only accepted Dana's full-time offer, but had quickly climbed the ranks to become a senior marketing executive. As I adjusted my necklace, a gift from Leah to celebrate my promotion, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. Urgent news about Ted. Call ASAP. My stomach clenched. The custody battle had been brutal, with Ted using every dirty trick in the book. But we'd been holding our ground thanks to my new job and the stability we'd built. "What's happened?" I asked as soon as my lawyer picked up. "Ted's filed for emergency custody," she said, her voice grim. "He's claiming you're an unfit mother due to your work schedule." The room spun. "What? That's ridiculous. I've bent over backwards to balance work and the boys." "I know, Natalie, but he's presenting a compelling case. We need to meet immediately to strategize." As I hung up, Leah appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "What's wrong?" I filled her in, my voice shaking. "How can he do this? After everything he's put us through?" Leah's eyes flashed with anger. "That bastard. He can't stand seeing you succeed without him." Just then, Jake and Ethan burst into the room, backpacks on and ready for school. Their smiles faded as they saw my face. "Mom?" Jake asked. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetie, just some work stress." As I hugged them goodbye, my heart ached. How could I tell them their father was trying to take them away? The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and terrified. Leah was waiting with a glass of wine and a sympathetic ear. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I confessed, tears streaming down my face. "Maybe I should just give in, go back to Ted." Leah grabbed my shoulders. "Don't you dare. You've come too far to give up now." Just then my phone rang. It was Dana. "Natalie, I hate to do this, but we need you in New York next week for the Johnson pitch. It's make or break for the company." My heart sank. A week away from the boys, right when Ted was pushing for custody. But if I said no, I could lose the job that was keeping us afloat. I'll be there," I said, my voice hollow. As I hung up, Leah looked at me with concern. "You can't go. Not now." "I have to," I replied. "If I lose this job, Ted wins. He'll prove I can't provide for the boys." The next morning, as I prepared to leave for work, Jake appeared in the kitchen, his young face serious. "Mom, are you and Dad fighting again?" I knelt down, meeting his eyes. "Honey, your dad and we're having some disagreements about where you and Ethan should live." Jake's lip trembled. "I don't want to live with Dad. I want to stay here with you and Aunt Leah." I pulled him close, fighting back tears. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure that happens. I promise." As I watched Jake board the school bus, my resolve strengthened. I couldn't let Ted win. Not when the boys' happiness was at stake. That evening, as I packed for New York, my lawyer called again. "Natalie, Ted's lawyer reached out. They're proposing a settlement." My heart raced. "What kind of settlement?" "Full custody to Ted with visitation rights for you." The room spun. "No, absolutely not." "Natalie, given your work commitments and the upcoming trip, it might be worth considering." "No," I interrupted, my voice steel. "I will not give up my children. Tell Ted and his lawyers we'll see them in court." As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman staring back was fierce, determined, and ready for battle. "Bring it on, Ted," I whispered. "I'm not the woman you married anymore, and I'm sure as hell not going down without a fight." I stood outside the courtroom, my heart pounding. Today was the final custody hearing, the culmination of months of legal battles and emotional turmoil. As I smoothed my blazer, Leah squeezed my hand. "You've got this, sis," she whispered. "No matter what happens in there, you've already won by becoming the strong woman you are today." I nodded, drawing strength from her words. As we entered the courtroom, I caught sight of Ted. He looked haggard, his once crisp suit rumpled, and his eyes bloodshot. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly replaced by steely resolve. The judge called the court to order, and Ted's lawyer began his final argument. He painted a picture of me as a career-obsessed mother who had abandoned her family. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream out in protest. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, meeting the judge's eyes. Your Honor, a year ago, I was a different woman. I had lost myself in a marriage that had become toxic and controlling. But leaving Ted wasn't about abandoning my family, it was about saving it. I gestured to the portfolio my lawyer had submitted. In the past year, I've built a successful career, providing stability and financial security for my children. But more importantly, I've shown them what it means to be strong, to stand up for yourself, and to create a loving home. As I spoke, I saw Ted's face crumple. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just angry, he was broken. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions about my work schedule and the boys' well-being. When she finally called a recess to consider her decision, I felt drained but hopeful. In the hallway, Ted approached me, his eyes red-rimmed. Natalie, can we talk? Leah started to intervene, but I held up a hand. It's okay, I've got this. Ted and I found a quiet corner. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, hurting our family, until it was too late. I studied his face, seeing the man I'd once loved beneath the anger and bitterness. Ted, I'm sorry too. Not for leaving, but for not being strong enough to stand up to you sooner. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I've lost everything, Natalie. The company's on the verge of bankruptcy. Lisa left months ago, but losing the boys, that's killing me. In that moment, I saw our entire history flash before my eyes. The good times and the bad, the love and the pain. And I made a decision. Ted, I don't want to take the boys away from you. They need their father. But they also need a healthy, stable environment. Can we find a way to co-parent that doesn't involve courts and lawyers? Hope flickered in his eyes. You'd be willing to try? I nodded. For the boys, and for us, not as a couple, but as parents who want the best for their children. When the judge called us back in, we approached her together. Our lawyers looked confused as we explained our desire to work out a co-parenting agreement outside of court. The judge smiled. I'm pleased to see you both putting your children's needs first. I'll grant a continuance to allow you to work out the details. But, she added, her gaze stern, if you can't come to an agreement, I will make a final ruling. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah was waiting, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. Are you sure about this? She asked as I explained what had happened. I nodded, watching Ted walk to his car. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. For all of us. That evening, as I tucked the boys into bed, Jake looked up at me with serious eyes. Mom, is Dad coming back? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. No, sweetie, Dad and I aren't getting back together. But we're going to work on being better parents to you and Ethan. You'll still see Dad regularly, and we'll all work on being a family, just in a different way. Jake nodded, seeming to understand. As I kissed him goodnight, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Later, standing on Leah's porch and looking up at the stars, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I'd lost a husband but found myself. I'd faced my greatest fears and come out stronger. And most importantly, I'd created a new kind of family, one built on love, respect, and resilience. As I breathed in the cool night air, I smiled. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the future, my future, our future. And it was bright with possibility. I stared at the glowing screen of Adam's phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The message from Claire blinked innocently, but its contents were anything but. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place. My fingers trembled as I set the phone back on the nightstand. Adam's soft snores filled our bedroom, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I slipped out of bed, padding quietly to the kitchen of our cramped apartment. The clock on the microwave read 2:17 a.m. I gripped the edge of the counter, willing my breathing to slow. This had to be a mistake. There had to be an explanation. Em? Adam's sleepy voice startled me. What are you doing up? I turned, forcing a smile. Just getting some water. Go back to sleep. He yawned, running a hand through his tousled hair. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I lied. Really? Adam shrugged, shuffling back to bed. I watched him go, my mind racing. Should I confront him now? Demand answers? or wait and see what happened. The next morning, I went through the motions of getting ready for work. Adam kissed me goodbye, same as always. Have a great day, hon. Love you. Love you too, I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. At the nonprofit where I worked, I couldn't focus. My coworker, Jen, noticed immediately. Emily, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I hesitated, then spilled everything. Jen's eyes widened as I told her about the text. Oh, sweetie, she said, squeezing my hand. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to follow him, see where he goes, but that feels wrong. Jen shook her head. No, you need answers. If he's cheating, you deserve to know. The rest of the day crawled by. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I raced to my car. Adam usually got home around 6:30. I had time. I parked down the street from our apartment, my stomach in knots. At 6:15, Adam's car pulled up, but instead of going inside, he walked to the corner and hailed a cab. My hands shook as I started the engine, following at a safe distance. We wound through the city until the cab stopped outside a trendy bar downtown. I watched, bile rising in my throat as Adam strode inside. 5 minutes later, a pretty blonde woman arrived. She glanced around before entering the bar. Tears blurred my vision as I fumbled for my phone. I snapped a picture just as the woman disappeared inside. Oh, Adam, I whispered. How could you? I don't know how long I sat there, numb with shock and betrayal. My phone buzzed, a text from Adam. Working late tonight, babe. Don't wait up. Anger surged through me, hot and fierce. I started the car, my mind made up. No more lies, no more excuses. As I pulled into our parking lot, my phone rang. It was Adam's mother, Lily. Emily, dear. Her syrupy voice grated on my nerves. I was thinking of stopping by tomorrow. Adam mentioned you two might be ready to start looking at houses. I have some ideas. Now's not a good time, Lily. I cut her off. I'll have to call you back. I ended the call, ignoring her protests. Taking a deep breath, I marched up to our apartment. It was time for a reckoning. The lights were off when I entered. I flicked them on, revealing the shabby furniture and peeling wallpaper. How had I let Lily convince us this dump was all we could afford? I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and began throwing Adam's clothes inside. Each item fueled my rage. By the time I heard his key in the lock, I was ready. Adam stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and perfume. He froze when he saw me. Em, what's going on? I met his confused gaze, my voice steady. I think it's time we had a talk, Adam, about Claire. 3 months had passed since that fateful night. Adam swore it was a one-time mistake, begged for forgiveness. Like a fool, I believed him. Now, as I stared at our dwindling bank account, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Em, did you hear what I said? Adam's voice snapped me back to reality. We sat at our rickety kitchen table, bills spread before us. Sorry, what? He sighed, exasperated. I said, Mom thinks we should look at that new condo development downtown. I blinked, stunned. Adam, we can barely afford this place. How could we possibly... Mom says she'll help with the down payment, he interrupted. She thinks it's a great investment. Of course she did. Lily always had an opinion on our finances, our careers, our entire lives. I bit back a retort, trying to stay calm. That's generous, but I'm not comfortable taking money from your mother. Adam's face darkened. Why not? She's just trying to help. Help control us, you mean? I muttered. What was that? I forced a smile. Nothing. Look, can we talk about this later? I have to get ready for work. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom, dinner this weekend? Before I could reply, Adam appeared behind me. Who's that? Just my mom, I said, pocketing the phone. She wants to have dinner. Adam frowned. This weekend? But we're supposed to look at condos with my mother. I stared at him, incredulous. When did we decide that? I told you last night, he insisted. You must not have been listening. The argument that followed was brief but intense. In the end, I caved. Again. Fine, I snapped. Tell your mother we'll go. At work, I couldn't focus. Jen found me hiding in the supply closet, fighting back tears. Oh, honey, she said, pulling me into a hug. What happened? I spilled everything, the condo, Lily's interference, Adam's attitude. Jen listened, her expression growing more concerned. Emily, she said gently, are you sure this is what you want? You seem so unhappy. I wiped my eyes, straightening my shoulders. It's just a rough patch. We'll get through it. But as the weekend approached, my anxiety skyrocketed. At a Saturday morning, I found myself trailing behind Adam and Lily as they toured a sleek, modern condo. "Isn't it perfect?" Lily gushed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the granite countertop. "Adam, darling, this is exactly what you need." I bristled at her words. What Adam needed, not what we needed. The realtor, a perky blonde named Sarah, turned to me. "What do you think, Mrs. Thompson? Can you see yourself living here?" Before I could answer, Lily cut in. "Oh, she loves it. Don't you, Emily?" I forced a smile, my hands clenched at my sides. "It's nice." Adam shot me a warning look. I knew that look. It meant, don't start anything. As Sarah led us to the master bedroom, my phone vibrated. A text from my dad. "Everything okay, sweetie? Haven't heard from you in a while." Guilt washed over me. I'd been so caught up in this condo nightmare I'd neglected my own parents. "Emily!" Lily's sharp voice made me jump. "Put that phone away. This is important." I looked up to see all three of them staring at me. Lily annoyed, Adam embarrassed, Sarah confused. Something inside me snapped. "You know what?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need some air." I turned and walked out, ignoring Adam's calls. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, trembling. What was I doing? This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the marriage I dreamed of. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from our joint bank account. A large transfer had just been made, the down payment for the condo. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears. Adam had done it, without even asking me. As I heard their footsteps approaching, I made a decision. It was time to stand up for myself, time to fight for the life I deserved. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and prepared for the confrontation that was about to come. The condo felt like a gilded cage. 2 weeks after moving in, I found myself staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows, longing for our old, cramped apartment. At least there, I'd felt at home. The sound of a key in the lock made me tense. Adam or Lily? These days it was hard to tell who'd come barging in uninvited. "Emily, darling." Lily's shrill voice echoed through the space. "Where are you?" I plastered on a smile and turned to face my mother-in-law. "Hi, Lily. I didn't know you were coming over." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Oh, I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop by and see how you're settling in." Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the living room. "You haven't unpacked everything yet?" I bit back a retort. "We've been busy with work. It's a process." Lily clicked her tongue. "Well, we can't have that. I'll call my interior decorator. She'll have this place looking fabulous in no time." "That's really not necessary." "Nonsense," Lily interrupted. "It's the least I can do. After all, I helped you get this lovely home." The way she emphasized helped made my skin crawl, as if we were children who couldn't manage on our own. "Actually, Lily," I said, finding my voice, "Adam and I were thinking of decorating ourselves. Make it our own, you know?" Lily's smile tightened. "Oh, sweetie, that's adorable. But let's leave it to the professionals, shall we? We wouldn't want it looking cheap." Before I could respond, she was on her phone, chattering away to her decorator. I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I poured myself a glass of water. This was supposed to be our fresh start, our chance to rebuild after Adam's indiscretion. Instead, it felt like Lily was taking over our lives more than ever. The front door opened again, and Adam's voice drifted in. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stayed in the kitchen, listening to their muffled conversation. When Adam finally appeared, he looked sheepish. "Hey, Em. Sorry about this. You know how Mom gets." I set down my glass, harder than necessary. "Yeah, I do. The question is, why do you let her?" Adam's face darkened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of your mother making decisions for us." I snapped. "This is our home, Adam. Ours, not hers. She's just trying to help," he argued. "Why can't you be grateful?" "Grateful?" I laughed bitterly. "For what? For undermining every choice we make? For treating me like I'm not good enough for her precious son?" Adam's jaw clenched. "That's not fair. Mom loves you." "No, Adam, she loves controlling you, and by extension, me." Our raised voices must have carried, because suddenly Lily appeared in the doorway. "Is everything all right in here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Adam cut me off. "It's fine, Mom. Just a little disagreement about decorating." Lily's eyes gleamed with interest. "Oh, well, I'm sure we can sort that out. Emily, dear, why don't you tell me your ideas? I'm sure we can find a compromise." The condescension in her tone was the last straw. "You know what, Lily? I don't want to compromise. This is my home, mine and Adam's, not yours." The room fell silent. Adam looked horrified, while Lily's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Well," she said, her voice dangerously low, "I see someone's forgotten their manners. Adam, are you going to let her speak to me like that?" I turned to my husband, silently pleading with him to stand up for me, for us. But as I watched the conflict play out on his face, I knew he would choose her. He always did. He said softly, "maybe you should apologize." In that moment, something inside me broke. This beautiful condo, this fresh start, it was all a lie. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever would. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. "I need some air," I muttered. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Lily's voice behind me. "Really, Adam, I don't know why you put up with her attitude." The elevator doors closed on Adam's reply, and I leaned against the wall, fighting back tears. I'd thought moving here would fix things. Instead, it had only made everything worse. As the elevator descended, I realized I had a choice to make. Stay and fight for a marriage that was slipping away, or find the strength to walk away and reclaim my life. The doors opened, and I stepped out into the sunlight, unsure of where to go, but knowing I couldn't stay here any longer. I sat in my parents' cozy living room, clutching a mug of tea, trying to find the words to explain the mess my life had become. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances as I recounted the latest drama with Lily and Adam. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "I'm so sorry you're going through this." Dad's face was a storm cloud. "That woman has no right to treat you this way. And Adam, he needs to grow a spine." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I just don't know what to do anymore. It's like I'm losing myself in their world." The sharp trill of my phone cut through the moment. Adam's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Where are you?" His voice was tight with tension. "Mom's been trying to reach you all day." I bit back sarcastic reply. "I'm at my parents'. I needed some space." "Space?" Adam sounded incredulous. "We have that dinner with my boss tonight. You knew that." "The dinner. I'd completely forgotten." "I'm sorry, Just get home," he interrupted. "Mom's already here to help you get ready." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, a knot forming in my stomach. "Everything okay?" Dad asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I stood, gathering my things. "I have to go. There's this work dinner for Adam." Mom frowned. "Emily, honey, maybe you should stay here tonight. You seem exhausted." Part of me wanted nothing more than to curl up in my childhood bedroom and forget the world, but I knew the fallout wouldn't be worth it. "I'll be fine," I assured them, forcing a smile. "I'll call you tomorrow." The drive home felt like a march to the gallows. As I entered the condo, Lily's voice hit me like a physical force. "There you are," she exclaimed, rushing over. "Honestly, Emily, how could you be so irresponsible, running off like that when you knew how important tonight is?" I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Adam cut in. "It doesn't matter now. She's here. Let's just get ready." Lily clucked her tongue, eyeing me critically. "Well, we'll have to work quickly. I've laid out a dress for you. Go shower, and I'll do your makeup." For a moment, I considered turning around and walking right back out the door. But Adam's pleading look stopped me. "Please, Em, this dinner could mean a big promotion." Defeated, I nodded and headed for the bathroom. As the hot water washed over me, I tried to steel myself for the evening ahead. An hour later, I stood before the mirror, barely recognizing myself. The dress Lily had chosen was tight and low-cut, nothing like my usual style. My face felt heavy with makeup. "Perfect," Lily beamed, adjusting my hair. "Now you look like a proper executive's wife." The words stung more than they should have. Is that all I was now? An accessory to Adam's career? As we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Hope you're okay, sweetie. We're always here if you need us." A lump formed in my throat. I started to type a reply, but Lily's sharp voice interrupted. "Emily, phone away. It's time to go." I looked up to see Adam already halfway out the door, Lily hovering impatiently behind him. Neither of them seemed to notice or care about my discomfort. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I thought about my parents' warm concern, contrasted with the cold expectations surrounding me now. I thought about the woman I used to be, confident, independent, and the shell I'd become. "Actually," I heard myself say, my voice stronger than I expected, "I don't think I'll be joining you tonight." Adam froze, turning slowly to face me. "What?" Lily's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're coming." I stood my ground, heart pounding. No, I'm not. And I think it's time we had a serious talk about our future, Adam. All of us. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched emotions flicker across Adam's face. Confusion, anger, and finally, fear. He knew, as well as I did, that this was a turning point. Whatever happened next would change everything. The tension in the room was palpable as Adam, Lily, and I faced each other. I'd changed out of the tight dress, back into my comfortable jeans and sweater, feeling more like myself. Emily, Adam began, his voice strained. What's this all about? We're going to be late. I took a deep breath. We need to talk about us, Adam, about our future. Lily scoffed. This is ridiculous. You're jeopardizing Adam's career over what? A little family disagreement? It's not little, I countered, my voice stronger than I felt. It's our life, and I'm tired of feeling like I don't have a say in it. Adam's face softened slightly. I know things have been tough, but... Tough? I laughed bitterly. Adam, I feel like I'm disappearing, like everything that makes me who I am is being erased. Lily stepped forward, her eyes flashing. Now you listen here, young lady. Adam has given you a beautiful home, a comfortable life, and this is how you repay him? Mom, Adam warned, but she was on a roll. You should be grateful. Instead, you're throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child. What about your parents, Emily? Did they put these ideas in your head? The mention of my parents was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Leave them out of this, I snapped. They've done nothing but support us. Support? Lily sneered. They're holding you back. Adam, tell her. Tell her how her parents are dragging you down. I turned to Adam, shock and hurt coursing through me. What is she talking about? Adam shifted uncomfortably. It's nothing, Em. Just some things Mom and I discussed. What things? I demanded. Lily jumped in. About how your parents are always asking for help, how they're a financial burden. Adam agrees it's time to cut ties. The room spun. I stared at Adam, silently begging him to deny it, but his silence spoke volumes. You, I whispered, my voice breaking. You want to cut my parents out of our lives? Em, it's not like that, Adam pleaded. We just think it might be best if we focused on our future, on building our own family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents have never asked us for anything. They've only ever tried to help. Help? Lily scoffed. By filling your head with nonsense about independence and following your dreams? Please. It's time you grew up, Emily. I turned to Adam, tears stinging my eyes. And you agree with this? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I think Mom has a point, Em. We need to start putting ourselves first. In that moment, something inside me shattered. The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, was siding with his mother over me, over my family. I see, I said, my voice eerily calm. Well then, I guess I know where I stand. I moved towards the bedroom, but Adam caught my arm. Em, wait, where are you going? I shook off his grip. I'm packing a bag. I can't stay here tonight, maybe not ever. Don't be dramatic, Lily snapped. Adam, tell her she's being ridiculous. But Adam just stood there, conflict etched across his face. Em, please, we can work this out. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. A man so entangled in his mother's web that he couldn't see the damage he was causing. Can we? I asked softly. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you've already made your choice. I turned and walked into the bedroom, my heart pounding. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I heard Lily's shrill voice and Adam's muffled responses. But I tuned them out, focusing on the task at hand. When I emerged with my bag, Adam was alone, Lily having finally left for the dinner. Emily, he said, his voice breaking. Please don't go. I met his gaze, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. I have to, Adam. I need time to think, to figure out if there's anything left to save here. As I reached for the door, Adam called out one last time. I love you, Em. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I love you too, Adam, but right now, that's not enough. With that, I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door on the life I'd known. As I rode the elevator down, I realized I was facing a crossroads. Stay and fight for a marriage that was crumbling, or leave and rediscover the woman I used to be. The choice, I knew, would change everything. 2 weeks had passed since I'd walked out of the condo. 2 weeks of soul-searching, of rediscovering who I was without Adam's shadow looming over me. I'd been staying with my parents, their unwavering support a balm to my battered spirit. But it was time. Time to face the music, to decide once and for all if my marriage was worth saving. I stood outside the condo door, key in hand, heart pounding. Adam's texts had been a mixture of apologies and pleas over the past fortnight. Part of me hoped that this separation had been a wake-up call for him. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the silence. No TV blaring, no Lily's shrill voice offering unsolicited advice, just quiet. "Adam?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No response. I moved through the living room, noticing small changes. My favorite throw pillow was missing. The photos of my family were gone from the mantel. A chill ran down my spine as I approached the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled sounds coming from inside. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. The world stopped. There, tangled in our sheets, the ones I'd picked out when we first moved in, was Adam. And he wasn't alone. A blonde head peeked out from under the covers, and I found myself staring into the startled eyes of Claire, Adam's coworker. For a moment, no one moved. Then Adam scrambled up, wrapping a sheet around his waist. I can explain. But I was already backing away, my vision blurring with tears. I turned and ran, Adam's desperate calls fading behind me. I made it to the elevator before the sobs hit, racking my body as I slumped against the wall. How could he? After everything we'd been through, how could he do this? My phone buzzed incessantly, Adam, no doubt, trying to reach me. I silenced it, unable to deal with his excuses. Instead, I called the one person I knew would understand. "Jen," I choked out when she answered. "Can you come get me? I'm at the condo." 20 minutes later, I was in Jen's car, recounting the horrific scene I'd walked in on. "That bastard," Jen seethed, gripping the steering wheel. "I'll kill him." I shook my head, feeling hollow. I can't believe it. Was I so blind? How long has this been going on? Jen's expression softened. "Oh, honey, this isn't your fault. Adam's the one who broke his vows." As we drove, my shock slowly gave way to anger. Years of compromises, of bending to Adam's and Lily's will flashed through my mind. And for what? To be betrayed in the most painful way possible? "I want to destroy him," I whispered, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. Jen glanced at me, a fierce glint in her eye. "Then let's destroy him. You've got options, Em. Legal options." My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lily. "How dare you upset Adam like this? Call him back immediately." Something snapped inside me. The last thread of hope, of love, severed cleanly. "You're right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need a lawyer, and I need to document everything." Jen nodded approvingly. "That's my girl. We'll start making calls tomorrow. For now, let's get you somewhere safe." As we pulled up to Jen's apartment, I felt a strange mix of devastation and determination. My marriage was over. That much was clear. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my revenge. I stepped out of the car, leaving behind the naive, accommodating Emily. In her place stood a woman scorned, a woman ready to fight for herself. Adam and Lily had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out. The office of Harriet Sloane, divorce attorney extraordinaire, buzzed with an energy that matched my own determination. I sat across from her, a thick folder of evidence spread between us. "Well, Emily," Harriet said, her steely eyes gleaming, "I must say, you've given me quite a lot to work with." I nodded, my jaw set. "I want everything I'm entitled to, and then some." Harriet smiled, a predatory grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, we'll get that and more. Adam's infidelity, combined with the financial records you've provided, let's just say he's in for a rude awakening." As we discussed strategy, my phone buzzed incessantly. "Adam," again. I silenced it without a second thought. "Now," Harriet continued, "about the condo." A commotion outside interrupted us. Raised voices, a scuffle. Suddenly the door burst open, revealing a disheveled Adam and an irate Lily. "Emily!" Adam cried, his eyes wild. "Please, just talk to me." I stood, fury coursing through my veins. "How dare you come here? This is a private meeting." Lily pushed past Adam, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "That's quite enough," Harriet interjected, her voice sharp as a blade. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, I suggest you leave immediately before I call security." Adam stepped forward, his hands outstretched. Baby, please, we can work this out. I made a mistake, but I love you." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "Love? You call what you did love? You betrayed me, Adam. You and your mother both." Lily bristled. Now see here. No, you see here, I snapped, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. You've controlled our lives for too long. You pushed me aside, belittled me, tried to cut me off from my own family. Well, guess what? It ends now. Adam's face paled. What are you saying? I turned to Harriet, who nodded encouragingly. I'm saying I want a divorce, and I'm going to take you for everything you're worth. The room fell silent. Adam staggered back as if I'd physically struck him. Lily's mouth opened and closed, for once at a loss for words. You can't do this, Adam finally whispered. What about our life together? Our future? Our future, I echoed incredulously. You threw that away the moment you decided to sleep with Claire. Adam's eyes widened in shock. Lily gasped, turning to her son. You didn't. Oh, he did, I confirmed, a grim satisfaction settling over me. In our bed, no less. The look of betrayal on Lily's face almost made me laugh. Almost. Adam, she hissed, is this true? He fumbled for words, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Mom, it's not. Save it, I cut in. I have all the evidence I need. Now both of you, get out. Security arrived, summoned by Harriet's discreet call. As they were escorted out, Adam made one last desperate plea. Emily, please. I'll do anything. We can start over, just the two of us. No more interference, I promise. For a moment I wavered. The look in his eyes, so familiar, so full of regret. But then I remembered the sight of him with Claire, and my resolve hardened. Goodbye, Adam, I said quietly, turning away. As the door closed behind them, I sank back into my chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Harriet watched me carefully. Are you all right? She asked. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Yes, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. I think I finally am. Harriet nodded approvingly. Good, now let's get back to business. We have a lot of work to do. As we dove back into the details of the divorce proceedings, I felt a spark of excitement. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. Adam and Lily had underestimated me for the last time. Now it was my turn to show them exactly what I was capable of. 1 year. It had been 1 year since I'd walked out of that condo, leaving behind a life that no longer fit. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the meek, accommodating Emily. In her place stood someone stronger, fiercer. Today was the day. The final hearing in my divorce proceedings against Adam. I'd fought tooth and nail for every concession, every dollar. Harriet had been a godsend, guiding me through the legal labyrinth with a shark-like tenacity that matched my own newfound determination. As I entered the courthouse, I spotted Adam and Lily huddled together, looking haggard and defeated. Adam's eyes met mine, a flicker of regret passing over his face. I held his gaze unflinching before turning away. The proceedings were a blur of legal jargon and tense negotiations, but when the judge finally announced her decision, time seemed to stand still. In light of the evidence presented, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Emily Thompson. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me as the judge detailed the settlement. The condo, half of Adam's savings, alimony. It was more than I dared hope for. As we filed out of the courtroom, Lily accosted me, her face twisted with fury. You've ruined him, she hissed. Are you happy now? I met her gaze calmly. No, Lily, you ruined him. You and your constant meddling, your toxic influence. I just finally stood up for myself. Adam appeared behind her, looking shell-shocked. Save it, Adam. I cut him off. It's over. Really, truly over. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. I was free. Months passed. I threw myself into my work at the nonprofit, channeling my newfound energy into causes I believed in. I reconnected with old friends, rebuilt my relationship with my parents. Slowly but surely, I rediscovered the joy in life that I'd lost during my marriage. Then, on a crisp autumn evening, my phone rang. Lily's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Emily? Lily's voice was small, broken. I need your help. She went on to explain how Adam had spiraled after the divorce, losing his job, turning to drinking. She was at her wit's end. Please, she begged. You're the only one who might be able to get through to him. For a moment, I was tempted. The old Emily would have rushed to help, would have sacrificed her own well-being for others. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I'm sorry, Lily, I said. My voice firm but not unkind. But that's not my responsibility anymore. Adam's choices are his own, just like yours. I hope you both find the help you need, but it won't be from me. I ended the call, a sense of finality settling over me. It was the last thread connecting me to my old life, and I'd just cut it clean. Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. My phone buzzed with a text from Jen. "Drinks tomorrow to celebrate your promotion?" I smiled, typing back a quick, "Absolutely." As I gazed out at the skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been hard, painful at times, but I'd emerged stronger, wiser, more true to myself than I'd ever been. I thought about the woman I was a year ago, trapped in a loveless marriage, constantly bending to the will of others. She seemed like a stranger now. "You did it, Emily," I whispered to myself, raising my glass in a silent toast. "You survived. You thrived." The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, I was excited to see where life would take me next. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I had the strength to face them. As the cool night air caressed my face, I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. This wasn't an ending, I realized. It was a beginning. My beginning. And I couldn't wait to see what came next. I stood at the kitchen counter, chopping onions for my signature beef stew, when Josie burst through the front door. Her face was flushed, eyes wild with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I set down the knife, wiping my hands on my apron. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Josie paced the kitchen, her hands clenched into fists. "I saw Dad today. He was with Claudia." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, with Claudia?" "They were at the mall, holding hands. I saw them, kissing." Josie's voice cracked on the last word. The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Are you sure it was them?" Josie nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm positive, Mom. I'm so sorry." I took a deep breath, trying to process this bombshell. Steve and Claudia, my husband and my best friend? It couldn't be true. But Josie wouldn't lie about something like this. "Did they see you?" I asked, my mind racing. "No, I don't think so. I ran out of there as fast as I could." I pulled Josie into a hug, feeling her body shake with sobs. "It's okay, sweetie. We'll figure this out." Just then, the front door opened again. Jesse walked in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He took one look at us and froze. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I released Josie and turned to face my son. "Jesse, we need to talk. All of us." We gathered around the kitchen table, the beef stew forgotten. I explained what Josie had seen, watching Jesse's face darken with each word. "I'll kill him," Jesse growled, his hands balling into fists. "No, you won't," I said firmly. "We need to handle this like adults." "But Mom," Josie interjected, "what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "First, I need to talk to your father. We need to hear his side of the story." "His side?" Jesse scoffed. "What side could possibly justify cheating on you?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I owe it to our family to at least hear him out before making any decisions." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us all freeze. Steve was home. "Kids, go to your rooms," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to talk to your father alone." Josie and Jesse exchanged worried glances, but did as I asked. As they climbed the stairs, I heard the front door open. "Laura?" Steve called out. "Something smells good." I stood up, smoothing down my apron. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists at my sides. Steve walked into the kitchen, a smile on his face that quickly faded when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" I looked at him, this man I'd loved for over 20 years, and felt my heart breaking. "We need to talk, Steve. Josie saw you today, with Claudia." The color drained from his face. "Laura, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can you explain why our daughter had to see her father kissing another woman? Can you explain why you'd betray me with my best friend?" Steve's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that moment of silence, I heard the muffled sobs of Josie from upstairs and Jesse's attempts to comfort her. I took a step closer to Steve, my voice low and dangerous. "You have one chance to tell me the truth, Steve. One chance to save this family. What's it going to be?" As I stared into his eyes, searching for any sign of the man I married, I realized that no matter what he said next, nothing would ever be the same again. Our perfect little family was shattered, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. I couldn't sleep that night. Steve's weak explanations and half-hearted apologies echoed in my head. By morning, I was a mess of anger and hurt, determined to see the truth for myself. I drove to Claudia's house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. As I turned onto her street, my heart stopped. There was Steve's car, parked right in front of her house. I pulled over, my vision blurring with tears. How could he do this? How could they both betray me like this? My phone buzzed. It was Jessie. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I'm fine, honey. I just needed to run an errand." "You don't sound fine. I'm coming to get you." "No, Jessie, But he had already hung up. I sat there, staring at Claudia's house, willing myself not to march up to the door and confront them both. 20 minutes later, Jessie's beat-up Corolla pulled up behind me. He got out and tapped on my window. I rolled it down, avoiding his eyes. "How did you find me?" "Find my iPhone," he said, his voice tight. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I gestured weakly at Steve's car. Jessie's face darkened as he understood. "Let's go home," he said, opening my door. "You shouldn't be here." As I got out, the front door of Claudia's house opened. Steve stepped out, laughing at something behind him. When he turned and saw us, the laughter died on his lips. "Laura? Jessie?" He looked between us, confusion and guilt warring on his face. Jessie stepped forward, his fists clenched. "How could you, Dad? How could you do this to Mom?" Steve held up his hands. "Son, it's complicated. You don't understand." "I understand plenty," Jessie spat. "I understand that you're a lying, cheating." "Jessie, stop," I said, grabbing his arm. "This isn't helping." Claudia appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Laura, I'm so sorry. We never meant for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "Never meant for what to happen, Claudia? For me to find out? For my children to see their father destroy our family?" Steve took a step toward us. "Laura, please, let's talk about this. Not here. Not like this." "No," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "We're done talking, Steve. We're done with all of it." I turned to Jessie. "Let's go home." As we drove away, Jessie glanced at me. "Mom, what are we going to do?" I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood blur past. "I don't know, honey, but we'll figure it out together." When we got home, Josie was waiting on the porch. One look at our faces told her everything. "It's true, isn't it?" she asked, her voice small. "Dad's really leaving us for her." I pulled both my children into a tight hug, feeling their bodies shake with silent sobs. "I don't know what your father's going to do," I said. "But I know that the three of us are going to be okay. We have each other, and that's what matters." We went inside, and I made us all some tea. As we sat around the kitchen table, I looked at my children's tear-stained faces and felt a fierce protectiveness wash over me. "I want you both to listen to me," I said. "What your father did was wrong. It's going to hurt for a long time, but we are not going to let this break us. We are stronger than that." Jessie nodded, his jaw set. "What do you need us to do, Mom?" I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Just be yourselves. Focus on school, on your friends. I'll handle everything else." Josie wiped her eyes. "But what about you, Mom? Who's going to take care of you?" I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest despite everything. "We'll take care of each other. That's what family does." As we sat there sipping our tea and making plans for the future, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Our lives had been turned upside down, but we were still standing. And no matter what Steve or Claudia or anyone else threw at us, we would face it together. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the front door slamming. Steve was home. I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. I found him in the kitchen, slumped at the table, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot and weary. "Laura," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady despite the turmoil inside. "Yes, we do." Steve took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. What I did, it was unforgivable." "You're right," I said, my voice cold. "It was." He flinched at my tone. "I want to make this right. Tell me what I need to do." I laughed bitterly. "Make it right? Steve, you can't just fix this with an apology and some flowers. You destroyed our family." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "but I want to try. For the kids, if nothing else." I set my coffee cup down hard, liquid sloshing over the rim. "Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. You should have thought about them before you started sleeping with my best friend." Steve's face crumpled. "Laura, please. I made a mistake, a terrible, awful mistake. But I love you. I love our family. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this, I spat. He stood up, reaching for me. I stepped back out of his reach. Don't touch me, I hissed. Steve's hand fell to his side. He looked defeated, lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What do you want, Steve? I asked, suddenly tired. Why are you really here? He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even after everything, I hadn't expected this. A divorce? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Steve nodded, not meeting my eyes. I think it's for the best, for all of us. I felt the room spinning. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. You want to leave me for her, for Claudia? It's not like that, Steve protested weakly. Then what is it like? I demanded, my voice rising. Explain it to me, Steve. Explain how you can throw away 20 years of marriage, 2 children, everything we've built together for what? A fling with a woman who wears too much perfume and maxes out her credit cards? Steve's face hardened. Don't talk about her like that. You don't know her. And you do? I laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. Let me guess, she understands you in a way I never could. She makes you feel young again. Is that it? Stop it, Laura, Steve said, his voice low and dangerous. No, you stop it, I shot back. You don't get to waltz in here and demand a divorce like you're asking for a cup of sugar. You don't get to destroy our lives and then act like you're the victim. Just then, Josie appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Steve's expression softened. Josie, honey, go back to your room. Your mom and I are just talking. No, I said firmly. She deserves to know. Your father wants a divorce, Josie. He's leaving us for Claudia. Josie's eyes filled with tears. Dad, is that true? Steve looked stricken. Josie, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did, Josie said, her voice breaking. You hurt all of us. She turned and ran upstairs. We heard her door slam shut. Steve moved to follow her, but I blocked his path. Leave her alone. You've done enough damage. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Laura, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, take some time apart, anything but this. I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. No, Steve, you wanted a divorce. You've got one. Now get out of my house. As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of grief and determination wash over me. Our life together was over, but I had 2 children who needed me. No matter what it took, I would protect them and give them the stability they deserved. Steve may have given up on our family, but I never would. I stood on Steve's parents' doorstep, my heart pounding. I'd always gotten along well with Martha and George, but this visit felt different, dangerous even. Still, I needed to try. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. Martha answered the door, her smile fading as she saw me. Laura, what are you doing here? I took a deep breath. We need to talk, Martha, about Steve. Huh? She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. George was in the living room, watching golf. He muted the TV as I entered. What's this about, Laura? He asked, his voice gruff. I sat down, clasping my hands tightly in my lap. Steve and I are getting a divorce. He's been having an affair with Claudia. The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's face paled, while George's reddened. That can't be right, Martha said finally. There must be some mistake. I shook my head. I'm afraid not. Josie saw them together, and Steve admitted it to me himself. George leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And what did you do to drive him to this, Laura? I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. Excuse me, George, Martha exclaimed, but he waved her off. No, I want to know, he pressed. Steve's a good man. He wouldn't do this without reason. I felt anger bubbling up inside me. Without reason. There is no reason good enough to justify what he's done. Martha sat down beside me, her face a mask of concern. Laura, dear, maybe if you'd been more attentive to Steve's needs. My needs? I interrupted, incredulous. What about my needs? What about our children's needs? George scoffed. Don't bring the kids into this. They'll be fine. Kids are resilient. I stood up, my hands shaking. Resilient? Do you have any idea what this is doing to them? Josie cries herself to sleep every night. Jessie's barely speaking to anyone. Well, maybe if you hadn't turned them against their father, Martha began. I didn't turn anyone against Steve, I snapped. He did that all on his own when he decided to throw away our family for a fling with Claudia. George stood up, towering over me. Now listen here, young lady. I won't have you coming into our home and speaking ill of our son. I refused to back down. Your son destroyed our family. He's abandoning his children for a woman who cares more about her designer handbags than anyone else. Martha gasped. How dare you speak about Claudia that way? She's a lovely woman. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. You knew, I whispered, looking between them. You knew about the affair, didn't you? Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. How long? I demanded. How long have you known? George looked away. That's not important. It is to me, I shouted. How long have you been lying to my face, pretending everything was fine? Martha stood up, wringing her hands. Laura, please try to understand. Steve was unhappy. Claudia makes him happy. I felt like I was going to be sick. And what about me? What about my happiness? What about our children's happiness? Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good, George said solemnly. I stared at them, these people I'd considered family for over 2 decades. The greater good? Is that what you call destroying a family? Martha reached out to touch my arm. I jerked away. Don't, I said, my voice cold. Don't you dare try to comfort me now. You're as much to blame for this as Steve is. I headed for the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I came here hoping for support, for some semblance of family. I see now that was a mistake. You're not my family. You never were. As I walked out, I heard Martha call after me, but I didn't turn back. My mind was racing, piecing together all the times Steve had visited his parents alone, all the knowing looks and hushed conversations. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'd come here looking for peace, for a way to salvage something from this mess. Instead, I'd found more betrayal, more pain. As I drove home, I made a decision. No more olive branches, no more attempts at reconciliation. From now on, I was fighting for myself and my children, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I was elbow deep in soapy water, scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary when the front door slammed open. Steve stormed into the kitchen, his face a thundercloud of rage. You went to my parents, he shouted, not bothering with a greeting. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands, trying to stay calm. Yes, I did. How dare you? Steve's voice rose. You had no right to drag them into this. I felt my own anger rising to match his. No right? They're my children's grandparents. I thought they deserved to know what was happening to their family. Steve laughed bitterly. Family? Is that what you call this? You've turned everyone against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, Steve, I said, my voice steady. You did that all on your own when you decided to cheat on me with my best friend. He slammed his fist on the counter, making me flinch. Don't you dare bring Claudia into this. Why not? I shot back. She's as much a part of this mess as you are. Steve's face contorted with anger. This is exactly why I want a divorce. You're always playing the victim, never taking any responsibility for your part in this. I felt like I'd been slapped. My part? What part did I play in your decision to betray our marriage vows? You were never there for me, Steve shouted, always too busy with the kids, with your hobbies, with everything but me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was raising our children, Steve. Someone had to be there for them while you were working late nights and weekends. Don't act like you're the only one who sacrificed, he spat. I gave up my dreams to provide for this family. And that gives you the right to throw it all away? I asked, incredulous. Before Steve could respond, we heard a gasp from the doorway. Josie stood there, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. Josie, Steve said, his voice softening. Honey, I'm sorry. We didn't mean for you to hear that. Josie shook her head, backing away. How could you say those things, Dad? How could you blame Mom for what you did? Steve reached out to her, but she turned and ran upstairs. We heard her door slam shut. The fight seemed to drain out of Steve. He slumped against the counter, suddenly looking old and tired. This is why I didn't want to involve the kids, he said quietly. I felt a surge of protective anger. They're already involved, Steve. They're living this nightmare right along with us. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Can't we try to make this work? For their sake? For a moment, I almost wavered. Then I remembered the look on Josie's face, the pain in Jesse's eyes when he found out about the affair. No, I said firmly. We can't. It's too late for that. Steve's face hardened. Fine. If that's how you want it, we'll do this the hard way. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. As he turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Steve," I called after him. He paused at the door, not turning around. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week," I said. "The kids and we need space to heal." Steve's shoulders slumped, but he nodded. Without another word, he left. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my mind racing. This was it. There was no going back now. We were really getting a divorce. I heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Jessie and Josie standing in the doorway, holding hands. Their faces were a mix of fear and determination. "Mom," Jessie said softly. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "Now, we fight for our family, for our future. It won't be easy, but we'll do it together." As I looked at my children's faces, I knew I had made the right decision. No matter what Steve or his parents or anyone else threw at us, we would face it as a team. And somehow, someway, we would come out stronger on the other side. The law office felt cold and impersonal as I sat across from my attorney, Sarah. She shuffled through a stack of papers, her face grim. "Laura, I won't sugarcoat this," she said. "Steve's playing hardball. He's going for full custody of the kids and wants to sell the house." My stomach dropped. "He can't do that, can he?" Sarah sighed. "He's claiming you're an unfit mother, citing your emotional instability since the separation." I felt the room spin. "Emotional instability? I'm not the one who threw away our marriage for an affair." "I know, Laura," Sarah said, her voice softening, "but we need to be prepared. This is going to be a tough fight." As I left the office, my phone buzzed. It was my new boss at the bakery. "Laura, I need you to come in. We're short-staffed." I glanced at my watch. Josie's parent-teacher conference was in an hour. "I can't. I have a commitment with my daughter." "Look," he said, his voice sharp. "I know you're going through a rough time, but I need reliable employees. If you can't make it, don't bother coming back." I felt tears pricking my eyes. "I'll be there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I called Josie, my heart heavy. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I can't make the conference. Work emergency." The silence on the other end was deafening. "It's fine," Josie finally said, her voice flat. "Dad said he'd go anyway." My blood ran cold. "Your father's going?" "Yeah," Josie said. "He called this morning, said he wanted to be more involved." I ended the call, my mind racing. Steve hadn't been to a school event in years. Why now? With a sinking feeling, I realized this was part of his strategy. Painting himself as the involved parent while I was too busy working to show up. The bakery was chaos when I arrived. I threw myself into the work, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of kneading dough and decorating cakes. But my mind kept wandering to Josie, to Steve sitting in that conference, charming her teachers. As I was closing up, my phone rang again. It was Jesse. "Mom," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Dad's here. He's packing up his stuff. And he's taking some of our things, too." I felt a surge of panic. "What? Jesse, don't let him take anything of yours or Josie's." "I'm trying, Mom," Jesse said, his voice cracking. "But he says as long as he's paying child support, he has a right to it. He took your recipe book, the one with Grandma's beef stew recipe." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That book was my most prized possession, filled with generations of family recipes. "I'll be right there," I said, already running for my car. I broke every speed limit on the way home, my heart pounding. When I pulled into the driveway, Steve was loading boxes into his car. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, slamming my car door. Steve turned, his face a mask of cold determination. "Taking what's rightfully mine, Laura. You can't keep everything." I marched up to him, fury coursing through my veins. "Give me back my recipe book, now." He smirked, holding it just out of reach. "Oh, this old thing? I thought I'd give it to Claudia. She's always wanted to learn how to cook." Something inside me snapped. I lunged for the book, but Steve was quicker. He tossed it into his car and slammed the door shut. "You can't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "That's my family history, Steve. It's all I have left of my grandmother." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I used to love in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. "You should have thought of that before you turned the kids against me," he said, getting into his car. As he drove away, I sank to my knees on the driveway, feeling utterly defeated. How had it come to this? How had the man I'd loved for 20 years become this stranger who seemed bent on destroying me? I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to see Jessie and Josie standing there, their faces a mix of anger and concern. "Mom," Jessie said softly, "what are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand. "We're going to fight," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Whatever it takes, we're going to fight." As we walked back into the house, I knew we were facing our toughest battle yet. But looking at my children, I also knew I had no choice but to win. For their sake and for mine. The phone rang, piercing the quiet of the kitchen. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. "Steve." "Hello," I answered, my voice wary. "Laura, we need to talk," Steve said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "Can we meet?" My heart raced. After weeks of bitter legal battles and emotional turmoil, what could he possibly want? "I don't think that's a good idea, Steve," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please, Laura, it's important for the kids' sake." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Finally, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, the park where we used to take the kids when they were little. As I drove there, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, hurt, and a tiny, traitorous spark of hope that I couldn't quite extinguish. Steve was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. As I approached, he stood up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Laura," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank you for coming." I sat down, maintaining a safe distance between us. "What do you want, Steve?" He took a deep breath. "I've made a terrible mistake. I want to come home. I want us to be a family again." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What?" "Claudia and I, it's over," he continued. "It was never real. You and the kids, you're my real family. I was a fool to throw that away." I stared at him, speechless. Part of me wanted to laugh hysterically, while another part wanted to scream. "Steve," I finally managed, "you can't be serious. After everything you've done, everything you've put us through, you think you can just come back?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I've hurt you, Laura. I know I've hurt the kids, but I want to make it right. I'll do anything. Therapy, whatever it takes." I stood up, needing to put physical distance between us. "And what about the custody battle? The house? My recipe book?" Steve had the grace to look ashamed. "I'll drop everything, the lawyers, the custody fight, all of it. I just want my family back." For a moment, I let myself imagine it, going back to our old life, pretending none of this had happened. But then I remembered the pain in Josie's eyes, the anger in Jessie's voice, the nights I'd spent crying myself to sleep. "No," I said, my voice firm. "No, Steve, we can't go back. You destroyed that the moment you chose Claudia over us." His face crumpled. "Laura, please, I love you. I love our children." "If you loved us," I said, feeling a strange calm wash over me, "you wouldn't have betrayed us in the first place." Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessie. "Mom, where are you?" the bakery called. "They need you ASAP or you'll lose your job." Reality came crashing back. I had responsibilities, a life I'd built without Steve. I couldn't throw that away on a whim. "I have to go," I said, turning away. Steve grabbed my arm. "Laura, wait. Don't do this. Don't throw away 20 years of marriage." I yanked my arm free, fury rising in me. "I didn't throw it away, Steve. You did, and now you have to live with the consequences." As I walked away, Steve called after me, his voice desperate. "What about the kids? Don't they deserve a chance to have their family back?" I stopped, turning to face him one last time. Our kids deserve parents who respect themselves and each other. They deserve stability and love, not broken promises and shattered trust. With that, I got in my car and drove away, leaving Steve standing alone in the park where we'd once been happy. As I raced to the bakery, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Had I made the right choice? Was I denying my children a chance at having their father back? But then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the resilience I'd seen in Jessie and Josie. We'd been through hell, but we'd survived. We'd built a new life, a stronger family unit. I pulled into the bakery parking lot, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: we would face them together, without Steve. Our family might be smaller now, but it was unbreakable. As I walked into the bakery, ready to fight for my job and our future, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in months, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision. The day of Jessie's college graduation dawned bright and clear. As I stood in the kitchen preparing a special breakfast, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. The doorbell rang and my heart skipped a beat. I knew who it was. "I'll get it," Jesse called from the living room. I heard muffled voices, then Jesse appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face a mix of emotions. "Mom, Dad's here. He wants to talk to all of us." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Okay, let's hear what he has to say. We gathered in the living room, Josie perched on the arm of my chair, Jesse standing protectively nearby. Steve sat across from us, looking uncomfortable in his suit. "I know I have no right to be here," Steve began, his voice shaky, "but I couldn't miss Jesse's graduation, and I wanted to apologize to all of you." I felt Josie stiffen beside me while Jesse's face remained impassive. Steve continued, "I've been selfish and stupid. I threw away the best thing in my life for nothing. Claudia left me. My parents barely speak to me. I've lost everything." "That's not our problem, Dad," Jesse said, his voice cold. "You made your choices." Steve nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I'll regret those choices for the rest of my life. But I was hoping maybe we could start over? Be a family again?" I felt a surge of anger, remembering all the pain we'd endured. But before I could speak, Josie stood up. "A family," she said, her voice trembling. "We are a family, Dad. Mom, Jesse, and me. We've been there for each other through everything. Where were you?" Steve looked stricken. "Josie, No," she interrupted. "You don't get to walk back in here and pretend nothing happened. Do you have any idea what Mom's been through? How hard she's worked to keep us together?" I reached for Josie's hand, squeezing it gently. "It's okay, sweetie." But Jesse stepped forward, his face set. "No, Mom. Josie's right. Dad needs to hear this." He turned to Steve, his voice steady. "Mom's been working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She's been to every school event, every doctor's appointment, everything. She even learned to make Grandma's beef stew from memory when you took her recipe book." I felt tears prick my eyes at the memory of that small victory. Steve looked at me, his face a mask of shame. "Laura, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved, but then I remembered all we'd been through, all we'd overcome. "I appreciate your apology, Steve," I said, my voice calm, "but we can't go back. We've moved forward and we're stronger for it." Steve nodded, defeat etched in every line of his face. "I understand. I hope someday you can forgive me." As he stood to leave, Jesse spoke up. "Dad, I still want you at my graduation, but not as my father. As a guest who's watching from afar, seeing what he lost." Steve's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "Thank you, Jesse. That's more than I deserve." After he left, we sat in silence for a moment. Then Josie turned to me, her eyes shining. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. Of us." Jesse nodded, pulling us both into a hug. "We made it, didn't we?" I held my children close, feeling a wave of love and pride wash over me. "Yes, we did, and we'll keep making it, every single day." Later, as we sat in the auditorium watching Jesse receive his diploma, I caught sight of Steve sitting several rows back. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw regret and longing in his gaze, but I felt no answering pull in my heart. Instead, I turned back to Josie, squeezing her hand as we cheered for Jesse. This was our family now, smaller perhaps, but stronger and more resilient than ever. As Jesse joined us after the ceremony, his face beaming with pride, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. "So," Jesse said, grinning at us, "who's ready for some celebratory beef stew?" Josie and I laughed, linking arms with him as we headed out into the bright sunshine. Our future stretched before us, full of promise and hope. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we were going to be just fine. "Kate, how much did you inherit?" Mark's voice cut through the heavy silence of the night. "Your dad was loaded. I need to know what you got." The words felt like slaps in the face. I looked at my husband, searching for any sign that this was some misguided attempt to comfort me. But his eyes were cold, calculating. Tonight of all nights, my father's funeral, and this is where his mind was? "Nothing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There wasn't anything left by the time the medical bills were paid." Mark's lip curled into a sneer. "Really? Is that the story you're sticking with?" I stood my ground. "Yes, it is." He scoffed and turned away, mumbling something about how incompetent my brother Mike must have been in handling everything. I could feel the unease settle deep in my gut. Mark's true intentions were becoming clear, and they weren't pretty. I moved to the kitchen, needing a moment away from his probing eyes. I started the kettle, hoping a cup of tea might soothe my nerves, but the quiet clinking of the spoon in my mug did nothing to drown out the alarming thoughts racing through my head. Mark's voice reached me even from the other room. "I need a drink," he grumbled, the sound of him rummaging through the liquor cabinet, loud and grating. How had I missed these signs? Or had I just ignored them, hoping things would magically get better? He walked into the kitchen, glass of whiskey in hand. "You know, I thought marrying you meant a step up in the world," he said bluntly. But apparently I was wrong. I didn't reply. Words felt useless against his blatant greed. I just stared into my tea, feeling more alone than ever. After a tense silence, he finally left the room. I heard the TV flicker on, blaring some mindless show. I clenched my fists around the mug. This was the moment, right now, where everything broke open. I couldn't ignore who he was anymore, and I certainly couldn't let him have any power over my future. I decided to keep a closer watch on him. It was clear now that I couldn't trust him, that whatever affection we once shared had withered away, replaced by his hunger for wealth and status. A few days later, I received a call from my mother, Paula. She didn't offer condolences or ask how I was doing, just launched into complaints about sorting out Dad's affairs. Typical. She always favored Mike, and I was used to being the afterthought. "Kate, I need you to help with the house," she droned. "Sure, Mom," I replied mechanically. "I'll be over tomorrow." "Bring Mark," she added. "We could use a man's help." I felt my frustration spike, but kept my voice even. "Mark's busy. It'll just be me." The call ended abruptly, and I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear long after she hung up. Mark breezed into the room just then, sipping another whiskey. "Spout, pack your things," I said suddenly. He looked at me, puzzled. "What for?" "We're going to Mom's tomorrow. She needs help with Dad's stuff." He scowled. "Are you serious? I have better things to do." "You're coming," I replied firmly, our eyes locking in a silent battle. Eventually, he shrugged and walked away. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened to his soft snores and felt a pit of fear and determination grow within me. This facade was crumbling, and soon everything would come to light. It was time to brace myself for the storm. I pulled up to the old family home, a sense of dread settling over me. Mark sat in the passenger seat, tapping his fingers impatiently on the dashboard. "Let's get this over with," he muttered as he climbed out of the car. As we walked up the path, memories flooded back. The house looked the same, yet everything felt different. The door swung open, and there was Paula, her face a mix of annoyance and impatience. "It's about time," she snapped. "I've been dealing with everything on my own." I stepped inside, brushing past her coldness. "Mom, this is Mark," I introduced, though she'd met him briefly at the funeral. Paula glanced at him and nodded curtly before turning her back on us. "Mike's in the study, going through paperwork. You two can start in there." I followed her voice to the study, the room an organized mess of papers, file cabinets, and old mementos. Mike barely looked up as we entered. Seeing him again was like running into a brick wall. His smirk was as smug as ever. "Hey, big sis," he scoffed. "Finally showed up to pitch in?" "You might say that," I replied tersely. "Let's just get through this, all right?" Mark hovered by the bookshelf, shifting his weight and looking uncomfortable. Paula's voice echoed from the hallway, giving orders like a drill sergeant. I rolled up my sleeves and dipped into the dreariness of sorting through years of memories and documents. Hours passed, the air thick with unspoken tension and strained small talk. Mark wandered out, leaving me to fend for myself with Paula and Mike. "This is pointless," Mike grumbled, tossing another stack of papers aside. "Dad should have taken better care of this stuff." "Maybe if you'd helped him once in a while." I let the words trail off, biting back more I wanted to say, but Mike just ignored me, pulling out another drawer, searching for something of value. Just then Paula stormed in. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, her tone dripping with irritation. "Why are you two still in here? There's more to do in the garage." We moved to the garage, and I got hit by another wave of nostalgia mixed with frustration. Old boxes of Christmas decorations, tools my dad barely used, and a neglected bike Mike rode once before, demanding a new one. Mark had reappeared, leaning against the car and scrolling through his phone. I could sense his growing irritation. He wasn't here to help. He was here to gain. While I rummaged around, Paula fixed me with a hard look. You know, she started, your brother was always the responsible one. Your father and I could depend on him. My grip tightened on an old photo album. Is that so? Yes, she snapped, clearly relishing the criticism. Unlike you, running off when things got tough. I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced myself to breathe deeply. No point in arguing now. I glanced at Mark, who seemed to be barely masking his impatience. For the first time, I felt a flicker of anger at him, not just for his greed, but for what I now saw as a willful blindness to the person I had become. Eventually, exhausted and angry, we decided to call it a day. Mike and Paula stayed behind, and Mark and I drove home in silence. When we got there, Mark finally spoke. Your family's something else, you know, he said, almost as if admiring them. Tell me about it, I mumbled, feeling drained. As I shut the door behind us, I already knew this wasn't the end. Things were just beginning to unravel, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The storm was coming, and this time I wouldn't be caught off guard. I met Mark when I was just getting by at a dull office job. It wasn't much, but it was steady, unlike my up-and-down family life. Mark walked into the office one day, suave and confident. He made me laugh during our coffee breaks, and soon enough we were dating. I thought he was my escape. One evening, I decided to take him to meet my family, hoping for some strange reason they'd approve. We drove to my old neighborhood, my anxiety growing with each mile. When we arrived, the door swung open, and there was my mother. Who's this, then? Paula asked, eyeing Mark up and down like he was another project to criticize. It's Mark, I said, pushing down my nerves. My husband. Paula's eyebrow arched. Oh, finally snagged someone, did you? Mark put his arm around me, trying to lighten the mood. Nice to meet you, Paula. Kate's told me so much about you. She ignored his outstretched hand, focusing instead on who really mattered to her. Come inside, she said curtly, turning toward the living room. Mike lounged on the couch, flipping through TV channels, not even bothering to look up. Sup, he muttered, finally glancing our way. I took a deep breath. Mark, this is Mike, my brother. Hey, Mark offered, but Mike just nodded, turning back to the screen. It hurt seeing how little they'd changed. Paula and Mike centered around their own little world. At dinner, the tension thickened with every passing minute. Paula gushed over Mike's recent promotion, never asking about my life or my job. I could see Mark trying to keep up, looking uncomfortable. So, what do you do, Mark? Mike asked suddenly, not out of interest but as a challenge. I'm an investment consultant, he replied. Mike smirked. Guess that pays the bills, huh? It does, Mark said flatly, his patience wearing thin. The real blow came later when I found my father seated alone in his study. He looked so different, frail and tired, with his breathing labored. It broke my heart. He'd been a distant but kind presence in my chaotic childhood, working tirelessly to provide for us. Hey, Dad, I said softly, his eyes lighting up slightly at the sound of my voice. Kate, you're here, he rasped, a weak smile appearing. We talked quietly, catching up on lost time. He confided in me, telling me how hard it had been to manage things lately, how disappointed he was in how Paula and Mike were handling everything. He looked pained, not just physically but emotionally. I'm sorry, Kate, he whispered. I wish I could have done more for you. I squeezed his hand. It's okay, Dad. You did what you could. Leaving the room, my chest tightened. Mark was in the kitchen, watching the interaction between Paula and Mike, his face unreadable. It's a mess, he whispered as we walked out. Your family, I mean. I know, I whispered back, my voice barely holding together. This visit had reminded me why I left. The toxic dynamic between my mother and brother, their constant need to belittle me, to treat me as an afterthought. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, I made a promise to myself. I would be there for my dad, but I wouldn't be used by anyone again. Not by Paula, not by Mike, and certainly not by Mark. A week after that unsettling visit, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was tense. Your father's getting worse, Kate, she said. We need help. I knew this day would come. I'll come over today, I replied, already dreading the interaction that lay ahead. I drove to the house, my mind weighing heavy with the mix of obligation and resentment. Mark didn't come this time, claiming he had a meeting. Might have been true, but I doubted it. Paula met me at the door, her face stern. He's in his room, she said without a hint of gratitude. And don't touch the things in the living room. Mike's sorting through some important stuff. I nodded and walked towards my father's room. Dad was propped up in bed, looking frailer than ever. His eyes met mine, a weary smile forming. "Kate, good to see you," he said, his voice a whisper. "I'm here to help, Dad," I replied, taking his hand. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine of caring for him, administering his medication, making sure he was comfortable, and speaking softly to ease his pain. Paula and Mike mostly stayed in the background with their true colors showing through their absence. One evening, I overheard a heated conversation in the living room. Paula's voice was shrill. "We need more money, Mike. Your father's hospital bills are eating up everything." "We can't sell the house yet," Mike replied. "People would talk." I paused outside the door, my anger simmering. They were already planning how to cash in, even as Dad lay dying in the next room. I entered the room, making no effort to hide my presence. "Is this really the time to be talking about money?" I snapped. Paula glared at me. "Don't you start. You disappeared for years while we dealt with everything." "Dealt with everything?" I echoed incredulously. "Is that what you call living off Dad while he worked himself into the ground?" Mike stood up, his eyes cold. "You have no idea what it's been like. You left." "And I had every reason to leave," I shot back. Paula folded her arms. "We'll see how long you last this time." That night, I sat by my father, listening to his labored breaths. He opened his eyes and looked at me, sadness mingled with relief. "Kate, I'm so sorry for everything." My chest tightened. "Dad, you don't have to apologize." He shook his head weakly. "I wasn't there for you. Should have protected you from them." I couldn't hold back the tears. "I'm here now." The following morning, I found Paula rifling through his drawer. I stood in the doorway, my voice cold as ice. "What are you doing?" She looked up, startled. "Just organizing his things." "Sure," I said, my tone flat. "Because you've always been so organized, right?" She slammed the drawer shut. "Don't you dare judge me." "I'm not judging, I'm observing," I replied, moving to sit by my father, who had just woken up. The days dragged on with the same routine, the house thick with tension. Mike occasionally showed his face, usually to complain about something or another. I stayed focused, doing what I could for Dad. One evening, Dad's eyes sought mine with a seriousness I hadn't seen in a while. "There's a bank account," he whispered. My heart skipped a beat. "Bank account?" He nodded, struggling for breath. "Not much, but it's yours. Secret. Use it wisely, Kate." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the weight of his words. He'd done what he could to ensure I had something, a small act of protection amidst the chaos. I squeezed his hand, promising myself I would make it count. Knowing what I now did, I felt a flicker of hope and determination. My father's efforts wouldn't be in vain. I wouldn't let Paula, Mike, or even Mark control my fate any longer. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The call came just after midnight. I had been tossing and turning in bed, my mind restless, when the phone rang, cutting through the silence. "It's your father." Paula's voice was clipped, devoid of emotion. "He's been taken to the hospital." I scrambled out of bed, barely replying as I threw on some clothes and grabbed my keys. By the time I reached the hospital, my heart was pounding with dread. I found Paula and Mike in the waiting area, looking annoyed rather than distressed. "The doctors are with him," Paula said brusquely. "We've been waiting for hours." I didn't bother to respond. Rushing past them, I found the room where Dad lay, surrounded by machines and tubes. He looked impossibly weak, barely recognizing me as I stepped closer. "Kate," he murmured. "I'm here, Dad," I whispered, clutching his hand. His grip was feeble but urgent. "Remember, the account. It's for you." "I know," I said, fighting back tears. "I'll take care of it." Moments later, his breathing grew shallow. The monitors beeped frantically and nurses rushed in. I was gently but firmly pushed out of the room. Paula and Mike stood in the hallway, waiting as if they were bored. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged, his face solemn. "I'm sorry," he said. "He didn't make it." Paula's face hardened, betraying nothing. Mike sighed, as if inconvenienced. I fought to keep my composure, feeling a mix of grief and rage. They didn't even care. Back at the house, it didn't take long for tensions to explode. As I gathered some of Dad's belongings, Mike cornered me in the hallway. "What's this about a secret account?" he demanded. I stared at him, anger flaring. "None of your business." He stepped closer, his face contorted with a smirk. I know he said something to you. You think you're getting away with it? Paula appeared behind him, arms crossed. Don't hold out on us, Kate. Whatever your father left, it's family property. Don't you dare, I snapped, my voice shaking with incredulity. You two leeched off him your whole lives. This is mine. Mike lunged, grabbing my arm. You're not taking anything, you ungrateful. I yanked free, my temper boiling over. Get your hands off me. Mark chose that moment to stroll in, smirking as he took in the scene. What's all this commotion? Kate thinks she's entitled to Dad's secret stash, Mike sneered. Secret stash? Mark's eyes lit up greedily. Fed up? I turned to leave, but Paula blocked my path. You're not going anywhere, she spat. Not until you tell us where that money is. Over my dead body, I hissed, pushing past them. I stormed out, my heart racing. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about standing up to them, about breaking free from their grasp. I knew what I had to do, and I wasn't going to back down. That night, I sat in my apartment, clutching the small bank booklet Dad had given me. The modest sum was enough to start fresh, to carve out a new path for myself. Their selfishness and greed had pushed me too far. I wasn't the same naive girl they could push around. They were about to learn the hard way that I wasn't someone to mess with. From here on out, I would take control of my life. Their time of exploiting everything and everyone was over. The first steps of my plan were clear. The storm was here, and I was ready to face it head-on. I returned to my apartment, the weight of my father's funeral still hanging heavily over me. I barely had time to process my own grief before Mark cornered me in the kitchen. Kate, he started, his eyes hard with impatience, we need to talk about the inheritance again. I felt a surge of anger. We've been over this. There's nothing significant. His face twisted with frustration. Stop lying. I overheard Mike talking about a secret account. Your dad must have left something worth hiding. I glared at him, feeling my blood boil. And what if he did? It's none of your business. None of my business, he scoffed, stepping closer. I'm your husband. Whatever you have, I have a right to it too. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I didn't marry you so you could pocket my family's money, Mark. His eyes narrowed. You're being ridiculous. Besides, there's something else you should know. I crossed my arms. What now? Mark hesitated for a split second before dropping the bombshell. I've been seeing someone else. The room seemed to spin for a moment. I steadied myself against the counter. What? I said, my voice barely a whisper. Lana, he said matter-of-factly. Mike's girlfriend. We've been seeing each other for months. Suddenly everything fell into place. His aloofness, the constant pressure about the inheritance, it all made sense. He had been planning this all along. You vile? I started, but he cut me off. And that's not all, he continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a set of papers. I want a divorce. Sign these. I stared at the divorce papers he placed on the counter, feeling a strange mix of anger and calm. Somehow his betrayal was almost a relief. It was the final confirmation that I needed to break free from him. I grabbed a pen and started signing. He watched me, clearly expecting more of a fight, but I was done. Finished. As I handed the papers back, I felt a sense of liberation. Fine, I said, my voice steady. Good riddance. A moment of silence passed, then Mark's smugness reappeared. Hope you and your so-called inheritance are very happy. Just then, he walked out the door, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I sat down, breathing deeply, taking in the newfound sense of freedom. Mark was out of my life, and I couldn't be happier. The days that followed felt strangely bright despite the chaos. Mark had moved in with Lana, his dreams of wealth tied to her. Meanwhile, I used my father's modest inheritance to start planning for my future. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to rebuild. A couple of weeks later, the phone rang. It was Mike. We need to talk, he said bluntly. What now? I replied, tired of their antics. Mark, he spat out. He moved in with Lana, thinking her family has money. They don't. I couldn't help but laugh. Just desserts. Good luck dealing with him, I said. Not my problem anymore. You're going to regret this, he hissed before hanging up. I leaned against the wall, feeling a small but satisfying victory. Mark's arrogance had led him right into a trap of his own making. As for me, I had a fresh slate and endless possibilities before me. Let them scheme and plot. I had learned the hard way how to stand up for myself, and nothing they did could take that away from me. I was finally free, ready to live life on my terms. The storm had come and gone, leaving me stronger and more determined than ever. And I wasn't done yet. I had plans, and nothing was going to stop me now. Mark's arrogant assumption that Lana's family had money proved to be his downfall. Within weeks, he was calling incessantly. At first, I ignored him, savoring the peace. One evening, the phone rang once more. I sighed and picked it up. "Hello? Kate, we need to talk." Mark's voice was desperate, a far cry from his usual arrogance. "Why? So you can try to worm your way back into my life?" I replied, my tone icy. "It's not like that," he pleaded. "Lana's family found out about us. They threw me out." I stifled a laugh, though I felt a tiny sense of satisfaction. "Not my problem," I said simply. "Kate, please," he continued, his voice wavering. "I made a mistake. We can fix this." I paused for a moment, savoring the irony. "You mean you finally realized what you had?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "I've been an idiot." "Well, I'm glad you admit it," I replied coolly. "But it's too late. You made your bed, Mark. Now lie in it." The silence stretched out between us, heavy and final. "Is that it, then?" he asked, his voice breaking. "That's it," I confirmed and hung up the phone. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Mark had been couch surfing, desperate and out of options. Mike had quickly distanced himself, blaming Mark for everything that went wrong and conveniently forgetting his own role in the mess. For once, I felt in control. I moved forward with my life, securing a small but significant freelance business. The inheritance my father left me became the seed money I needed. I poured my focus and determination into work, savoring the freedom and independence I had long craved. One crisp morning, while I was responding to client emails, the phone rang again. The caller ID showed Mike's number. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? You think you're so smart, don't you?" Mike's voice seethed with anger. "Dad's money was supposed to be for all of us. I earned it, Mike. You and Mom took everything else while Dad was alive," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "We're losing the house." I took a deep breath. His anger was almost palpable, but it no longer had power over me. "Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to work for something." "You'll regret this, Kate. I'll make sure of it," he snarled before hanging up abruptly. I set the phone down, feeling the weight of his threat. But instead of fear, I felt an unusual sense of calm. I had faced worse, and survived. What could Mike possibly do now? As the weeks turned into months, I flourished. My small freelance business grew, and for the first time in years, I felt grounded and secure. Every time I heard about Mike and Paula's growing financial troubles, a part of me felt vindicated. One evening, I sat in my small but cozy apartment, looking out over the city. I had come a long way, and the journey had been anything but easy. Yet, here I was, standing tall and moving forward. The ghosts of my past no longer haunted me. They were simply part of the story I had overcome. The phone rang again, but this time I didn't feel a jolt of anxiety. I picked it up calmly, ready for whatever came next. "Hello? Kate, it's Mom." She started, but I cut her off, my voice steady and firm. "I'm done, Mom. Take care of yourselves." I hung up, feeling a profound sense of closure. The storm had come and gone. I was free, strong, and finally living life on my own terms. The years rolled by quickly after I hung up on my mother. I poured everything into my freelance business, growing it from a side hustle into a thriving enterprise. The modest inheritance from Dad turned out to be more than just financial stability. It was the foundation for a new life. My new apartment, though small, felt like a palace. It was mine, a space free of the shadows of my past. I spent comfortable evenings reading by the window, the city lights dancing in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness of my earlier years. One afternoon, my phone rang. Seeing an unknown number, I almost let it go to voicemail, but then answered on a whim. "Hello? Kate, this is Miss Johnson from the bank. I wanted to inform you that your mother's assets have been frozen. There's been a foreclosure on the house." I paused, taking in the information. "Thank you for letting me know," I said before hanging up. A few days later, I found myself walking through an old, familiar neighborhood. The house looked the same, but there was a for sale sign on the lawn. I felt an odd mix of nostalgia and triumph. Paula and Mike's reign of exploiting Dad's hard work had come to an end. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. It was from Mike. "You think you've won, don't you? This isn't over." I rolled my eyes. "Grow up, Mike," I muttered, texting back a simple, "Move on with your life." I put the phone away and continued down the street, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Months passed, and my life continued to flourish. One chilly morning, as I was setting up a new project for a client, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mike standing there, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. "Kate," he began, desperation in his voice. "I need help." I sighed, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. "Mike, you've had chances, plenty of them. It's different now. We've lost everything. Mom's sick," he pleaded, his bravado gone. "Look, I can't keep being your crutch. You need to stand on your own," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "We're family," he insisted. "Family?" I scoffed. "You never acted like it. You chose to ignore Dad's wishes, and now you're paying the price." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. "You need to go," I said finally. "Figure out your life." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Kate." I watched as he walked away, a sense of finality settling over me. It wasn't my job to fix their mess anymore. I had my life to live and my own path to follow. As weeks turned into months, I started receiving updates on Paula and Mike through old neighbors. Their lives had become a cycle of struggle and regret. Strangely, I felt no satisfaction, just a profound sense of relief that I had escaped that toxic environment. One day, while taking a break from work, I found myself heading to a small, secluded park not far from my apartment. It was a quiet place, full of large oak trees and benches. I picked one near a small pond and sat down, the cool breeze soothing. As I sat there, I felt an odd sense of closeness to my father. It was almost as if his spirit was there, watching over me. I closed my eyes, taking in the peace of the moment. "I've come a long way, Dad," I whispered to the wind, feeling his presence in the rustling leaves. Opening my eyes, I looked at the world around me with a sense of accomplishment. I had fought hard for this peace, and I would cherish it. There was a future ahead, bright and full of promise, and I was ready for whatever came next.